My future son-in-law kept asking about the mineral rights on my ranch, but like an old fool, I mistook his greed for curiosity. As I walked my only daughter down the aisle ready to give her away, she pulled a crumpled note from her white roses and pressed it into my palm. It did not say, "I love you, Dad." It said, "Help me." I stood up and stopped the ceremony right there. I did not know I was about to start a war against a powerful family that thought they could bury a 72-year-old black man and steal his legacy. Before I tell you how I brought their empire crashing down, let me know which city you are tuning in from in the comments below. I am Isaac Robinson, and at 72 years old, I have learned that the strongest structures often have the deepest cracks. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer building bridges across Texas. I know how to spot stress fractures in concrete, and I certainly know how to spot them in people. Standing at the back of the First Baptist Church that afternoon, I saw a fracture that made my blood run cold. The organ music swelled, filling the vaulted ceiling with a triumphant melody that felt entirely wrong. My daughter Nia held my arm. Her grip was tight. Too tight. It was not the nervous squeeze of a bride about to start a new chapter. It was the desperate clawing of someone hanging off a cliff. Through the layers of white lace on her sleeve, I could feel her trembling. I looked down at her. Nia was 28 years old, an architect who could design skyscrapers, yet today she looked small. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding the gaze of the 300 guests filling the pews. Most of them were strangers to us. They were the business associates and socialite friends of the Caldwell family. On the left side of the aisle sat my small group of friends and relatives, retired mechanics, teachers, and engineers from the neighborhood. On the right side was a sea of designer suits and expensive jewelry. We began to walk. Every step felt heavy. At the end of the aisle stood Preston Caldwell. He looked like the perfect groom in his custom Italian tuxedo. He was 32 years old with the kind of polished smile that politicians and sharks share. He watched us approach with a look of ownership, not love. I remembered the dinner 2 weeks ago when Preston insisted on moving the wedding date up by 6 months. He claimed it was because he could not wait to start his life with Nia. I had found it romantic then. Now as I looked at his eyes, I saw something else. I saw impatience. I saw a man checking his watch, waiting for a transaction to close. We reached the altar. The smell of expensive lilies was suffocating. Preston reached out to take Nia's hand. He did not gently guide her. He snatched her hand. It was a subtle movement, fast and aggressive. His fingers dug into her wrist. I saw Nia wince just for a second before her face went blank again. That mask of indifference was something I had never seen on my vibrant daughter. The vicar began his speech talking about holy unions and eternal bonds. I stood a step behind Nia, ready to take my seat in the front pew. That was when it happened. Nia shifted her bouquet of white roses from her right hand to her left. As she did, her hand brushed against mine. I felt paper. It was done in a split second. A master of sleight of hand could not have done it better. She pressed a small ball of paper into my palm. Her hand was ice cold. I sat down on the velvet cushion of the pew. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I kept my hand closed around the paper. I glanced at Preston. He was staring straight ahead, his profile sharp and arrogant. He had not seen it. I slowly unfolded the paper in my lap, keeping it hidden under the cover of my suit jacket. It was a scrap torn from a hymnal page. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. It looked like it had been written in the dark. "Dad, help me." 3 words, no explanation, just a plea from a daughter to her father. The air in the church suddenly felt thin. I looked at the back of Nia's neck. She was rigid. This was not cold feet. This was terror. I looked at Preston again. His hand was resting on the small of her back. To the congregation, it looked like a supportive gesture, but I was sitting 3 feet away. I could see the tension in his forearm. He was not holding her. He was restraining her. The vicar raised his voice for the traditional question. If anyone here presents knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was thick. Usually this is the moment for polite smiles and cleared throats. Preston turned his head, slightly smirking at the crowd. He looked confident. He looked untouchable. He thought he had won. I gripped the handle of my cane. It was solid hickory wood, strong enough to support my bad knee and heavy enough to do damage if needed. I thought about the deed to my ranch. I thought about the sudden rush for this wedding. I thought about the fear in my daughter's eyes. I drove my cane into the floorboards with a loud thud. I object. The words rang out clearer than the church bell. A gasp swept through the room like a wave. Heads turned. Whispers erupted. On the other side of the aisle, Preston's mother, a woman who wore pearls worth more than my truck, clutched her chest in theatrical horror. Preston turned around slowly. His smile did not vanish, but it froze, becoming jagged and dangerous. "Excuse me, Isaac," he said, his voice low and dripping with condescension. "I do not think you heard the vicar correctly. This is the part where you stay silent." I stood up. My knee protested, but I ignored the pain. I stepped up to the altar. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at the vicar who stood with his mouth open. I looked only at my daughter. "Nia," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We are leaving." Nia turned to me. Tears were finally spilling over her lashes, ruining her makeup. She looked ready to collapse. She took a step toward me. Preston moved faster than I expected. He stepped between us, using his height to block my path. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and worked out in an expensive gym. I was 72 and walked with a limp. He thought the math was in his favor. "Sit down," Isaac Preston hissed. "You are embarrassing yourself. You are ruining Nia's special day." "I am saving her life," I said. I reached past him and grabbed Nia's arm. "Come on, baby girl." Preston grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron hard. The veneer of the polite businessman vanished completely. His eyes were black holes of rage. He leaned in close until I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. He lowered his voice to a whisper so only I could hear. "If you walk her out of that door, old man, I will ruin her." I stopped. I looked him dead in the eye. "You will do what?" "I have pictures," Preston whispered. "Private pictures, videos, things she thought were just for us. If you take one more step toward that exit, I will upload them to every social media platform in the world. Within 5 minutes, your daughter will be the most famous girl on the internet. Her career as an architect will be over. Her reputation will be ash." He smiled then. It was the devil's smile. "Now sit down," he said, leaning back and smoothing his lapel. "Be a good father and let us finish this." I felt the blood rushing in my ears. The rage was a hot physical thing in my chest. I looked at Nia. She had heard him. She was shaking her head slightly, her eyes pleading with me to surrender. She was willing to sentence herself to a lifetime of misery to protect her dignity, but she had forgotten who her father was. I am not just a man who builds bridges. I am a man who knows that sometimes you have to demolish a condemned building before it collapses on top of you. I looked at Preston, hand on my wrist. I looked at his smug parents in the front row. I looked at the 300 witnesses. Preston thought he had leverage. He thought shame was a weapon that worked on men like me. But I grew up in a time when they tried to shame us for drinking from the wrong water fountain. I grew up working double shifts in the mud while men like Preston's father sat in air-conditioned offices. Shame does not work on a man who has nothing to hide. I made a decision in that split second. A decision that would cost me my peace but save my daughter's soul. I did not sit down. I tightened my grip on my cane. "You think you can threaten me, boy?" I said loudly enough for the first few rows to hear. Preston's eyes widened slightly. He had not expected me to speak. I turned to Nia. "Do you want to marry this man?" She sobbed. "No." That is all I needed to hear. I yanked my arm free from Preston's grip. The force of it surprised him, and he stumbled back a step. I turned to the crowd. My voice boomed through the silent church. "The wedding is over. Everyone go home." Preston lunged at me. "You senile old fool, you are making the biggest mistake of your life." He reached for Nia again. His hand was aimed at her neck. That was the moment the engineer in me took over. I saw the angle of his approach. I saw the uneven distribution of his weight. I saw the weakness in his stance. I did not swing my cane like a club. I used it like a precision instrument. I drove the rubber tip of the hickory stick hard into the soft spot just above his kneecap. Preston screamed. It was a high-pitched sound that did not match his masculine tuxedo. His leg buckled. He collapsed onto the marble steps of the altar, clutching his knee. The church erupted into chaos. Preston's mother was screaming. The groomsmen were rushing forward. "Run, Nia," I shouted. I grabbed her hand and we ran. We ran past the stunned vicar. We ran past the gasping guests. We ran down the long aisle toward the heavy oak doors. Behind us I could hear the heavy footsteps of Preston's security detail. "Get the truck!" I yelled to Nia as we burst out into the blinding Texas sunlight. She hiked up her heavy wedding dress and sprinted toward the parking lot where my rusted Ford F-150 was parked next to the shiny limousines. It looked like a beat-up old warrior surrounded by plastic toys. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. I could hear shouting behind us. "Stop them! Do not let them leave!" It was Preston's voice. He had recovered faster than I hoped. I threw the truck door open and shoved Nia inside. Her veil got caught in the door and she ripped it off, leaving a piece of white tulle fluttering in the wind. I climbed into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered. "Come on, old girl," I whispered. "Do not fail me now." I looked in the rearview mirror. 3 men in black suits were running toward us. They were big. They were fast. And one of them was reaching into his jacket for something that looked suspiciously like a weapon. The engine roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. I slammed it into reverse tires, screeching against the asphalt. "Dad, look out!" Nia screamed. One of the security guards had lunged for the door handle. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, sending the heavy truck spinning. The side mirror clipped the guard, sending him tumbling into the flower bushes. I shifted into drive and floored the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, leaving the church and the shouting mob behind in a cloud of dust. We were on the highway before either of us spoke. Nia was curled up in the passenger seat, ripping the pearls off her neck as if they were burning her skin. "He is going to do it, Dad," she whispered, her voice broken. "He is going to release the photos." "My life is over." I kept my eyes on the road. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "No, Nia," I said, "his life is over. He just does not know it yet." But I was wrong. As I looked in the side mirror, I saw a black SUV gaining on us fast. Preston was not going to let us go that easily. The hunt had just begun. The sound of my hickory cane cracking against Preston's knee bone was still echoing in my ears as we burst through the heavy oak doors of the church. The Texas heat hit us like a physical blow. It was 90 degrees and humid, but the sweat running down my back had nothing to do with the weather. "Run, Nia," I shouted. My daughter hiked up the layers of her $10,000 Vera Wang dress. She was running in satin heels, stumbling over the pavement. She looked like a fallen angel trying to escape hell. I moved as fast as my bad leg would allow. The pain was sharp, a familiar bite that I had lived with since a steel beam crushed my ankle in '82. But today, the pain was fuel. We reached the parking lot. It was a sea of black Mercedes and white limousines, the kind of cars that whispered money and power. And right there in the middle of them sat my truck. It was a 1990 Ford F-150 with faded red paint and a dent in the rear bumper from a stubborn bull. It looked like a sore thumb, and I had never been happier to see it. "Get in," I yelled, unlocking the passenger door. Nia threw herself inside, tearing the delicate lace of her skirt on the running board. She did not care. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving with panic. I scrambled into the driver's seat. The vinyl burned my skin through my suit, but I gripped the steering wheel tight. Behind us, the church doors flew open again. 3 men in black suits came sprinting out. These were not ushers. These were private security. Preston Caldwell did not go anywhere without hired muscle. They were big, young, and fast. The one in the lead was reaching into his jacket. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine coughed. "Please, old girl," I whispered. "Do not die on me today." I pumped the gas pedal. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that sounded like thunder. I threw the gear stick into reverse and slammed my foot down. The tires screeched against the asphalt, sending up a cloud of white smoke. The lead security guard lunged for my door handle. I saw his face in the window inches from mine. He had cold, dead eyes. I yanked the wheel hard to the left. The heavy steel frame of the truck swung around like a wrecking ball. The side mirror clipped the man in the chest, sending him tumbling backward into a row of manicured hedges. "Hold on," I shouted to Nia. I shifted into drive and floored it. The truck fishtailed for a second, finding its grip before launching forward. We tore out of the church parking lot, leaving tire marks on their pristine pavement. We hit the main highway doing 60. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I spent 40 years calculating loads and stresses. Panic is a structural weakness, and I could not afford to be weak. "Dad," Nia gasped, looking into the side mirror. "They are following us." I looked up. A black Escalade was tearing down the on-ramp behind us. It was huge, dark, and aggressive. I could see 2 figures in the front seat. They were closing the distance fast. Preston Caldwell did not just want his bride back, he wanted to silence us. I pressed the gas pedal flat against the floor. The old Ford shuddered as the needle climbed past 70, then 80. The engine whined in protest, but she held together. The Escalade was faster. It was a machine built for speed and intimidation. Within seconds, it was right on my bumper. I could see the grill in my rearview mirror like the teeth of a predator. "They are going to ram us!" Nia screamed, covering her head with her hands. "No, they are not," I said. My voice was calm, cold. They are used to driving on pavement. They are used to bullying sedans and sports cars. They do not know how to handle a truck that was built to haul concrete. I saw the exit for Route 9 coming up. It was a sharp turn leading to the old industrial access roads. I kept the truck in the center lane, acting like I was going to stay on the highway. The Escalade moved to the left lane, pulling up alongside us. The window rolled down. The passenger was shouting something, pointing for us to pull over. I looked at him and didn't blink. At the very last second, I jerked the wheel to the right. The Ford groaned as the weight shifted, but the heavy suspension held. We cut across the painted lines, narrowly missing a plastic divider, and shot down the exit ramp. The Escalade driver tried to follow, but he was going too fast. He slammed on his brakes. I watched in the mirror as the heavy SUV skidded sideways, tires smoking, before it managed to correct itself and turn after us. We had gained a few seconds. That was all I needed. We were on the back roads now. This was my territory. The road was narrow, full of potholes and loose gravel. The Escalade roared up behind us again. The driver was angry now. He gunned the engine, trying to tap my rear bumper to spin us out. I watched the road ahead. I knew every crack in this asphalt. I knew where the soft shoulders were. "Hang on, Nia." I saw what I was looking for. A narrow bridge over the creek. It was an old steel truss bridge, one lane only. I gunned the engine, speeding up toward the narrow opening. The Escalade accelerated too, trying to cut me off before the bridge. I waited. It was a game of chicken, and I had nothing left to lose. 50 yards, 30 yards. The Escalade swerved toward me, trying to push me off the road. I slammed on the brakes. It was a move I learned driving trucks in the Army. The Ford deceleration was instant. The Escalade shot past us, its momentum carrying it forward. The driver realized too late that the bridge was too narrow for him to enter at that angle. He swerved hard, crashing through the wooden guardrail and sliding down the muddy embankment into the creek below. I did not stop to watch. I shifted gears and rolled across the bridge, the wooden planks rattling beneath my tires. We drove in silence for the next 20 minutes. The adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by a cold, hard dread. I checked the mirrors constantly, but the road behind us remained empty. We turned onto the dirt road that led to Robinson Hills. The familiar sound of gravel crunching under the tires usually brought me peace. Today it sounded like a countdown. My ranch was 500 acres of rolling hills and oak trees. I had bought it when it was nothing but swamp and scrub. I had drained the land, reinforced the soil, and built the farmhouse with my own 2 hands. It was my sanctuary. I pulled the truck up to the front porch and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine and the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. "We are safe," I said quietly. Nia did not move. She sat there staring at the dashboard, her wedding dress torn and stained with grease from the doorframe. Her hands were shaking so hard, her engagement ring was tapping a rhythm against the plastic. "Nia," I said, gently reaching out to touch her shoulder. She flinched as if I had burned her. Then she crumbled. It started as a low whimper, then turned into a sob that shook her entire body. She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands. I got out of the truck and walked around to her side. I opened the door and pulled her into my arms. She fell against me, weeping uncontrollably. I held her just like I used to when she was a little girl, and scraped her knee. But I could not fix this with a bandage. "Let us go inside," I said. We walked into the living room. It was cool and dark, the blinds still drawn from when I left this morning. I sat Nia down on the old leather sofa. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands finally starting to tremble. I came back and handed her the glass. She took a sip, her teeth chattering against the rim. "Talk to me, Nia," I said, sitting in my armchair opposite her. "Why did you do it? Why did you almost marry him?" Nia looked up at me. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, making her look like a tragic painting. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a folded document. It was warm from being against her skin. She threw it on the coffee table. "He made me sign it yesterday," she whispered. I picked up the paper. I put on my reading glasses. It was a transfer of deed. A quitclaim deed to be exact, transferring 50% of Robinson Hills to the Caldwell Trust, effective upon marriage. He wanted the land. I said, my voice flat. I knew that. No, Dad, Nia said, her voice rising. It is not just about the land. Look at the second page. I flipped the page. My blood turned to ice. It was a power of attorney document, but it was not for the land. It was for medical decisions. It gave Preston Caldwell full authority over my medical care in the event of my incapacitation. He told me he had a plan. Nia choked out. She was hugging herself, rocking back and forth. He told me that if I did not marry him and sign the land over, he would have you declared incompetent. He has a doctor on his payroll. He showed me the papers, Dad. They have a file on you. They were going to say you have dementia. They were going to put you in a state facility. I lowered the paper. The room seemed to spin. He said he would make sure you died alone in a room with no windows, she sobbed, unless I married him, unless I gave him the land. He said it was a trade, the land for your freedom. I looked at my daughter. She had walked into the lion den, not because she was weak, but because she was trying to save me. She was willing to sacrifice her life, her body, and her happiness just to keep me safe. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I looked at the signature on the bottom of the page. Nia Robinson. The ink was smudge where a tear had fallen on it. So you signed it, I said softly. Yes, she whispered. But Dad, I did not just sign the land away. She looked me in the eye, and for the first time I saw the fire that I knew was in her blood. He thinks he won, she said. But he does not know what I know. He does not know what you told me about the soil samples from the north pasture. I stared at her. A slow realization began to dawn on me. But before I could speak, my phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize. I answered it. Hello, Isaac Robinson. Preston's voice came through the speaker, smooth and terrifyingly calm. You ran fast, old man, but you cannot run from the law. I just got off the phone with the sheriff. He is on his way. And Isaac. I gripped the phone tight. Do not bother locking your doors, Preston said. This time I am not coming to talk. I am coming to take what is mine. The line went dead. I looked at Nia. I looked at the document on the table. Get up, Nia, I said, standing up and grabbing my cane. What are we going to do? She asked, wiping her eyes. We are going to war, I said, and we are going to start by showing Preston Caldwell that he just stepped onto a bridge that is about to collapse. I laid the document flat on the oak coffee table, smoothing out the creases with my calloused hand. The paper was heavy and expensive, just like everything else in Preston Caldwell life. I adjusted my reading glasses and began to read. Every line I read felt like a nail being driven into a coffin. This was not a prenuptial agreement, it was a death sentence disguised as legal jargon. The document was titled A Gift of Asset Management, but the fine print told a different story. It granted the Caldwell Trust full irrevocable power of attorney over all assets currently held by Nia Robinson. And since I had put the deed to Robinson Hills in Nia's name 10 years ago to avoid inheritance taxes, this paper gave Preston the keys to my kingdom. But it was paragraph 4 that made my stomach turn. It stated that in the event of the primary landholder mental incapacitation, the trustee would have full authority to make medical and housing decisions. I looked up at Nia. She was curled in the armchair, hugging her knees, staring at the floor with hollow eyes. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. But she was not the one being punished. We both were. He told me it was just for tax purposes, Nia whispered, her voice trembling. He said the wedding gift tax would be huge if we did not consolidate our assets before the ceremony. He brought the notary to the rehearsal dinner, Dad. Everyone was drinking champagne. I just signed it. I did not read it. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. I did not scream. A structural engineer does not scream when he sees a crack in the foundation. He assesses the damage. You did not sign a tax form, Nia, I said, my voice low and steady. You signed a warrant for my imprisonment. This paper says he can sell the land. It also says he can put me in a home if he decides I am unfit to live here. Nia let out a choked sob. I am so sorry, Dad. I am so stupid. You are not stupid, I said firmly. You are trusting. There is a difference. Preston is a predator. Predators know how to camouflage themselves as protectors until it is too late. I stood up and walked to the large bay window that overlooked the north pasture. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the rolling hills. The grass was knee-high green and lush, swaying in the Texas breeze. To anyone else, it just looked like grazing land. But to me, it was history. I remembered standing on this exact spot 42 years ago. Back then, it was not a pasture. It was a swamp. The air had smelled of stagnant water and rot. The real estate agent, a man with a nervous smile, had laughed when I said I wanted to buy it. He told me it was a waste of money. He called it Robinson Folly behind my back. He said you could not build on mud. But they saw the surface. I saw the structure. I had spent weeks surveying the geological maps in the county library. I knew that 20 feet below that muck lay a massive shelf of solid granite. It was the strongest foundation in the county. I spent 5 years draining the water, hauling in fill dirt, and driving pylons down to that bedrock. I built this house on that granite. I built my life on it. And now a man who had never lifted anything heavier than a golf club wanted to steal it with a stroke of a pen. He does not want the land for cattle, I said, turning back to Nia. He knows about the granite, too. He wants to strip mine it. He wants to turn our home into a gravel quarry. Nia looked up, her eyes widening. A quarry. Yes, I said. That is why he needed me out of the way. You cannot have an old man living on top of a mine. The silence in the room was shattered by the ringing of my cell phone. It was loud and shrill in the quiet house. I looked at the screen. It was a number I knew well. Sheriff Miller. I hesitated. Miller and I went back 20 years. We fished in the same lake. But Miller played poker with Preston father every Friday night. In a small town, alliances are thicker than blood. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Jim, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Isaac Miller's voice was tight, too loud. He sounded like a man reading from a script. Where are you? I am at home, Jim, I said. Where do you think I am? I need you to listen to me carefully, Isaac Miller said. I am outside your gate. I have 2 deputies with me. I need you to come out with your hands empty. Do not bring the girl. My grip tightened on the phone. Do not bring the girl. He was not calling her my daughter. He was calling her the victim. What is this about Jim? I asked, staring at the locked front door. Preston filed a report. Isaac Miller sighed. He says you abducted Nia at the church. He says you assaulted him with a weapon. And Isaac, he showed us the medical papers. My heart skipped a beat. What papers? The psych evaluation, Miller said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. The one from Dr. Sterling. It says you have advanced dementia, Isaac. It says you are prone to violent paranoid episodes. Preston says you had an episode at the altar. He says you think he is trying to steal your land. I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. I do not think it, Jim. I know it. And I do not have dementia. I can recite the load-bearing coefficient of a steel-eye beam right now. That is the paranoia talking, Isaac Miller said. Listen to me. We do not want to hurt you. We just want to get you some help. Preston has arranged for a bed at the Sunset Hills facility. Just let Nia go and come out. I looked at Nia. She was standing now, watching me with terror in her eyes. She could hear the sheriff voice through the phone. He is lying, she whispered. Tell him he is lying. Jim, I said, my voice hardening. If you come through that gate without a warrant, you are trespassing. Nia is here of her own free will. She is 28 years old. She is under the legal guardianship of her husband, Miller. Interrupted. He is not her husband, I snapped. They did not finish the vows. According to the law, the marriage license was signed this morning, Isaac Miller said, coldness creeping into his tone. The ceremony is just a show. Legally, she is his wife. And legally, you are a danger to yourself and others. I am not asking any more, Isaac. I am telling you. You have 5 minutes to surrender, or we are coming in. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. I looked at the window. Through the slats of the blinds, I could see the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the oak trees at the end of the driveway. They were here. They are not going to arrest me, I told Nia, my voice calm and deadly. They are going to commit me. If I walk out that door, I will never see this house again. They will drug me and lock me away until I drool on myself, and then they will tear this house down. Nia grabbed my arm, her fingernails dug into my skin. What do we do, Dad? We cannot fight the police. We are not fighting the police, I said, moving toward the gun cabinet in the corner. We are fighting a lie. But to do that, we need time. I unlocked the cabinet and took out my old hunting rifle. I did not load it. I did not intend to shoot anyone. But a man holding a gun buys hesitation, and hesitation buys time. Go to the back door, I commanded. Run through the cornfield to the old barn. The truck is too conspicuous. Take the tractor. Drive it to the service road that cuts through the woods. What about you? Nia cried. I am not leaving you. You are not leaving me, I said, grabbing my coat. You are going to get the one person who can stop this. You are going to get Marcus. Marcus, Nia asked, confused. Your old student. The computer guy. Yes, I said, checking the scope on the rifle. Preston is fighting with paper and lies. We need to fight with data. Marcus can find the money trail. He can prove the debts. He can prove the fraud. But Dad... Nia grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. If you stay here, they will take you. I looked at my daughter. She was strong. She had my eyes. She had her mother resilience. Let them take me, I said. It is part of the plan. Part of the plan, she asked. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had calculated the breaking point of the bridge and knew exactly when to detonate the charges. Preston thinks I am a senile old man, I said. He thinks I am fragile. He wants to put me in a facility. Good. Let him put me there. Because that is exactly where his doctor is. That is where the fake medical records are. If I am on the inside, I can find the proof. Nia stared at me, realizing the risk I was taking. Go, I said, pushing her toward the kitchen. Do not stop until you find Marcus. Tell him the structure is compromised. He will know what to do. Nia hugged me one last time, a fierce, desperate embrace. Then she turned and ran. I heard the back door open and close. I stood alone in the living room of the house I had built. The flashing lights outside were getting brighter. I could hear the crunch of boots on gravel. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I sat down in my armchair, the rifle resting across my lap, not aimed at anyone, just resting there like a tired friend. I waited. Preston Caldwell wanted to play a game of chess. He thought he had taken my queen. He did not realize that sometimes you sacrifice a knight to trap the king. The front door burst open. Sheriff Miller stood there, his service weapon drawn. Isaac Robinson. Drop the weapon, he shouted. I looked at him. I looked at the deputies behind him. I looked at the ghost of the man I used to fish with. Hello, Jim, I said calmly. You are late for dinner. I watched the convoy of police cruisers kick up a storm of red dust as they roared down my driveway. There were 3 of them, their sirens screaming against the quiet evening sky. They stopped just inches from my main gate. The red and blue lights flashed rhythmically, painting the oak trees in violent colors. I stood on the other side of the heavy iron gate. In my right hand, I held my grandfather Remington hunting rifle. I did not raise it. I kept the barrel pointed safely at the ground. In Texas, a man has the right to arm himself on his own property. I knew the law better than the deputies sitting in those air-conditioned cars. I was not looking for a fight, but I was done running. Sheriff Miller stepped out of the lead vehicle. He adjusted his belt and put on his Stetson hat. He walked up to the gate, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped 5 feet away, grabbing the iron bars with both hands. Open the gate, Isaac, he shouted over the hum of the idling engines. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at him. I did not move. I am not opening anything, Jim, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the night air. You do not have a warrant. And until you show me a judge's signature signed in ink, this gate stays locked. Miller sighed, shaking his head. He looked tired. He looked like a man who was just following orders. But those are the most dangerous kind of men. We do not need a warrant for a welfare check, Isaac Miller said. We have credible reports that you are holding a woman against her will. That is probable cause. Now put down the gun and let us in. She is my daughter, I said, and she is inside drinking tea. She is not a hostage. The only people threatening her are the ones trying to break down my door. One of the deputies, a young man I did not recognize, rested his hand on his holster. I saw the movement. My grip on the Remington tightened just a fraction. Easy, son, I said, keeping my eyes on the deputy. This is a deer rifle. It can hit a target at 300 yards. At this distance, I do not even need to aim. Keep your hand away from your belt. The deputy froze. Miller shot him a warning look. Isaac, listen to me, Miller said, his voice softening. This is not just about the girl. It is about you. Preston told us about your episodes. He showed us the videos of you shouting at invisible people. We know you are not well. We just want to get you to a doctor. I laughed. It was a cold sound. Deep fakes, I said. Or just good acting. I built bridges that have withstood hurricanes, Jim. My mind is the only thing stronger than this gate. I am not opening it for anyone except my lawyer. As if on cue, a pair of headlights appeared behind the line of police cars. But these were not sirens. It was the distinct white glow of luxury LED beams. A sleek black Bentley navigated around the police cruisers and pulled up right next to the sheriff. The window rolled down. I expected to see Preston. Instead, I saw his mother. Catherine Caldwell stepped out of the car. She was 60 years old but looked 40 thanks to expensive surgeons. She wore a cream-colored silk suit that cost more than my tractor. She looked at the dust on her heels with disgust before turning her cold blue eyes on me. Preston's father, Richard Caldwell, got out of the driver's seat. He was a tall man with silver hair and the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. Preston followed them, stepping out of the back seat like a prince protected by his royal guard. Catherine walked up to the gate, standing right next to the sheriff. She looked at me through the iron bars like I was an animal in a zoo. "Isaac," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Look at you, standing in the dirt with a gun. You are proving every word my son said about you." I looked at her. I had known Catherine for years. She had never invited me to her home. To her, I was just the man who owned the land her son wanted. "Go home, Catherine," I said. "This does not concern you. It concerns me when you kidnap my daughter-in-law," she snapped. Her face twisted into a sneer. "Nia is a Caldwell now. She belongs to us. Hand her over, Isaac. Stop delaying the inevitable. She is not property," I said, stepping closer to the gate. "She is a human being, and she is not going anywhere with you." Preston stepped forward. He had a bandage on his knee where I had hit him. He was limping, but his smile was back. "Actually," Isaac, Preston said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "She is property." In a manner of speaking, he held up the paper. "My lawyer faxed this to the sheriff 5 minutes ago," Preston said. "It is the medical power of attorney Nia signed yesterday. It is ironclad. It states that in the event of mental instability, I have full custody of her person and her assets." I felt a chill run down my spine. Mental instability. "Nia is not unstable," I said. Preston laughed. "Oh, but she is. We have the records, Isaac. Dr. Sterling has been treating her for months. Generalized anxiety, paranoia, hysteria. And today she ran out of her own wedding and fled with a man known to have dementia. That sounds like a psychotic break to me." He turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff, enforce the order," Preston demanded. "My wife is having a mental health crisis. As her legal guardian, I demand you remove her from this dangerous environment." Miller looked at the paper. He looked at me. "He is right," Isaac, Miller said. "The paperwork is legal. I have to go in." I raised the rifle slightly. Just an inch. But it was enough. "You are not coming in," I said. "Not until my lawyer sees that paper." Preston shook his head. "You are making this very ugly, Isaac. And for what? You are broke. You are old. You are fighting a war you lost 10 years ago." Just then, another car pulled up. It was a beat-up Honda Accord. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, climbed out. He was a small man with thick glasses and a suit that had seen better days. He ran up to the gate, clutching his briefcase. "Wait!" he shouted. "Do not shoot! Everyone calm down!" I lowered the rifle. Thank God. Henderson was here. He would fix this. He would find the loophole. Henderson walked past the Caldwells, ignoring their glares. He took the paper from the sheriff and adjusted his glasses. He read it under the glare of the police headlights. I watched his face. I waited for him to frown. I waited for him to point out the mistake. I waited for him to tell them to go to hell. But he did not. His shoulders slumped. He looked up at me and his eyes were full of apology. "Isaac," he said softly, "open the gate." What I asked. My hearing must be failing. "Open the gate," Isaac Henderson repeated. "The document is valid. Nia signed it in front of a notary. It gives Preston full authority. If you do not open the gate, they will ram it down, and then they will arrest you for felony kidnapping and armed resistance." "But it is a trap," I said, gripping the iron bars. "They tricked her." "It does not matter," Henderson said sadly. "Legally it stands. If we fight this now, you go to jail, and Nia goes to a facility. At least if you surrender, you can fight it in court later." I looked at Preston. He was beaming. He whispered something to his mother and she laughed. a cruel, high-pitched sound. I looked back at the house. I knew Nia was watching from the window. I knew she was trusting me to protect her. But a structural engineer knows when a load is too heavy. If I fought now, the whole building would collapse. I had to let them in to save the foundation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key to the padlock. The metal felt cold and heavy. I unlocked the chain. It rattled as it fell to the ground. I pushed the heavy iron gate open. It groaned on its hinges. Preston walked in first. He did not look at me. He walked straight past me toward the house like he owned it. Catherine stopped in front of me. She leaned in close, her perfume smelling like dead flowers. "Smart choice, old man," she whispered. "Do not worry. We will take good care of the land. I have always wanted a rose garden right where your porch is." I did not answer her. I watched them walk toward my house. I watched the deputies surround my truck. I had lost the gate. I had lost the standoff. But as I watched Preston limp up the steps to my front door, I remembered the soil samples. I remembered the secret burying underneath the north pasture. They were walking into my house, but they did not know they were walking onto a minefield. I handed my rifle to the deputy. "Be careful with that," I said. "It has a kick, just like me." The deputy took my rifle and locked it in the trunk of his cruiser. The sound of that metal latch clicking shut felt like a prison door closing on my freedom, but I did not flinch. I stood tall, my hands at my sides, watching Preston Caldwell smirk at me from the other side of the gate. He thought he had stripped me of my weapon. He did not understand that a rifle is just a tool. The real weapon was the 72 years of experience locked inside my head. I looked at Henderson, my lawyer. He was wiping sweat from his forehead, looking miserable. "I am sorry, Isaac," he whispered. "We will fight this in court on Monday, I promise." Monday was 3 days away. In 3 days, Preston could have Nia committed to an institution and my land sold to a shell company. Monday was too late. I turned to Sheriff Miller. "I am coming with you," I said. Miller blinked, surprised. "Excuse me." "The order says Preston has guardianship of Nia," I said, keeping my voice level. "It says he decides where she lives. It does not say I cannot visit my daughter. And since she is in distress, I am not leaving her side. If you want to arrest me for trespassing, do it. But I am not going back into that house alone." Preston laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. "You want to come to my house?" he asked, incredulous. "You want to sit in my living room and watch me win?" "I want to make sure my daughter is safe," I said, "unless you are afraid of an old man with a bad leg." Preston's face darkened. He hated being challenged, especially in front of an audience. He looked at his mother. Catherine shrugged, adjusting her silk scarf. "Let him come," she said casually, as if discussing a stray dog. "We can put him in the servant quarters downstairs. It will save the sheriff the paperwork of arresting him. Besides, I want him to see exactly what a real family legacy looks like." Preston smiled, a cruel idea forming in his mind. "Fine," he said. "Get in the car, Isaac. But try anything and I will have Miller throw you in a cell so dark you will need a flashlight to find your own nose." I did not dignify that with a response. I walked past him and climbed into the back seat of the Bentley next to Nia. She was shivering even though the air conditioning was set to a comfortable 70 degrees. I took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. She squeezed my hand back, a silent communication between father and daughter. "We are walking into the lion den," she whispered so low the driver could not hear. "Lions are lazy," I whispered back. "They sleep 20 hours a day. We just have to be awake when they are not." The drive to the Caldwell estate was short. They lived in a gated community called the Heights. It was the kind of place where the grass was cut with scissors and the trees were planted in perfect geometric rows. It was beautiful and completely soulless. We pulled up to the house. It was a mansion built to look like a French chateau, but it lacked the history. It was all new stone and fake grandeur. Preston opened the car door and gestured for us to get out. "Welcome home, Nia," he said, grabbing her arm. I stepped out, leaning heavily on my cane. The pain in my knee was throbbing, but I pushed it to the back of my mind. We walked into the foyer. It was cavernous with marble floors that echoed under our feet. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling. Catherine turned to a woman in a maid uniform who was waiting by the stairs. "Maria, take Mr. Robinson to the guest room," she said. Then she paused and smiled. "Actually, take him to the room off the utility hall, the one we used for storage. He will be more comfortable down there. It is closer to the dirt he is used to." Nia started to protest, but I squeezed her hand again, silencing her. That will be fine, I said. Preston dragged Nia up the grand staircase. I will see you at dinner, Isaac, he called down. Try to dress appropriately. I watched them go. I memorized the layout of the upper floor. Master suite on the left, guest rooms on the right. I followed Maria through a door under the stairs down a narrow hallway that smelled of bleach and lemon polish. She opened a door at the end of the hall. It was a small room with a single high window that looked out at ground level. There was a cot, a small sink, and a chair. It was a cell in everything but name. Maria looked at me apologetically. I can get you some extra blankets, sir, she whispered. It gets cold down here. Thank you, I said. She left, closing the door softly. I sat down on the cot. It was hard and lumpy. I looked around the room. Most men would have felt humiliated. They would have felt the sting of being put in the basement while the people who stole their life slept in silk sheets upstairs. But I did not feel humiliated. I felt focused. They had made a tactical error. They put the structural engineer in the basement. The basement is where the foundation is. It is where the pipes run. It is where the electrical panels are. It is the heart of the house. And if you want to know if a building is rotting, you do not look at the roof. You look at the basement. I waited. Time passed slowly. I heard the muffled sounds of dinner being served upstairs. I heard laughter. I heard the clinking of expensive crystal. I did not eat. Hunger keeps the mind sharp. Night fell. The house grew quiet. I stood up and walked to the door. I tried the handle. Locked. I expected that. I went to the sink. I turned on the faucet. The pipes groaned. I knelt down and opened the cabinet under the sink. The plumbing was exposed. Copper pipes running into the wall. But there was something else. A large ventilation grate near the floor. It was an old-fashioned central heating system. The ducts were metal, and metal carries sound better than air. I used a coin from my pocket to unscrew the bolts holding the grate in place. I pulled it off carefully, setting it on the floor. I lay down on the cold concrete and put my ear to the opening. The ductwork acted like a giant tin can telephone. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I could hear the television in the den. And then I heard voices, angry voices. They were coming from the study directly 2 floors above me. I need more time, Richard Preston's voice was echoing down the shaft. He sounded desperate, not arrogant. You do not have time, Preston father's voice boomed. The bank called me today. They are freezing the credit line. Do you understand what that means? The construction loan is in default. I pressed my ear closer to the metal. It is, Isaac Fault, Preston shouted. If that old man had just signed the deed last week, we would have the collateral. The investors are spooked, Richard. They know we are leveraging assets we do not technically own yet. Lower your voice, you idiot, Richard hissed. If Catherine hears you, she will have a stroke. She thinks we are liquid. We are not liquid. Dad, Preston said, his voice cracking. We are vapor. If we do not get the title to Robinson Hills by Friday, the whole pyramid collapses. The cartel investors are not like the bank. They do not send letters. They send hitmen. I stopped breathing. Cartel. Preston was not just a greedy developer, he was washing money. And he had lost it. I have the power of attorney now, Preston continued. I can force the sale. I just need a few days to make it look legitimate. I will get Nia to sign the final transfer tomorrow. How? Richard asked. She is stubborn like her father. Preston laughed, but it was a nervous sound. Dr. Sterling gave me a sedative, a strong one. I will put it in her tea. She will be so out of it she will sign a confession to the Kennedy assassination if I ask her to. Once I have the signature, I will wire the deed to the offshore account. By the time Isaac realizes what happened, the land will belong to a shell corporation in the Caymans. And the old man, Richard asked. Preston's voice went cold. Once the land is gone, he is useless. We will drop him off at the state facility. Sterling has the paperwork ready to declare him a danger to society. He will spend the rest of his life in a padded room drooling into a cup. I pulled my head back from the vent. My heart was beating slow and hard. They were broke. They were desperate. And they were dangerous. I sat up in the darkness. Preston thought he had trapped a helpless old man in his basement. He thought he had isolated me, but he had just given me the blueprints to his destruction. I looked at the copper pipes under the sink. I looked at the electrical conduit running along the ceiling. I was 72 years old. I could not fight Preston with my fists. I could not outrun his security guards. But I knew how things were built, and I knew how to take them apart. I stood up and walked to the small window. I reached up and felt the frame. It was loose. Poor construction. They had spent all their money on the marble facade and cut corners on the foundation. Typical. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the morning. The lions were asleep. It was time for the engineer to go to work. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small multi-tool I always carried on my keychain. They had taken my rifle. They had taken my phone, but they had forgotten to check my pockets for a 3-inch piece of steel that could unscrew a hinge or cut a wire. I looked at the locked door. I did not need to escape. Not yet. First, I needed to find the safe. I had heard Richard mention a ledger in previous conversations with my lawyer, a physical ledger where they kept the real numbers because they were too afraid to put them on a computer. If I could find that ledger, I would not just save my land. I would send the entire Caldwell family to federal prison for the next 100 years. I knelt down by the door and inserted the thin blade of the tool into the lock mechanism. Click. The door swung open silently. I stepped out into the dark hallway. The house was silent. I moved toward the stairs, my cane tapping softly on the carpet runner. I was not the prisoner anymore. I was the hunter. Preston came down the stairs into my basement cell at 6 in the morning. He smelled of fresh coffee and stale desperation. He did not bother with pleasantries. He threw a clipboard onto the lumpy mattress of my cot. The plastic clattered loudly in the silence of the room. "Sign it," he said. I sat up slowly, rubbing the stiffness from my bad knee. I picked up the clipboard. It was a document titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Property Rights. It was a legal surrender. It stated that I, Isaac Robinson, was of unsound mind and that I voluntarily transferred all administrative rights of the Robinson Hills estate to the Caldwell Trust to pay for my medical care. I looked up at him. "You are not very creative, Preston. You already tried to steal the land through Naya. Now you are trying to steal it through me." Preston leaned against the doorframe. He was wearing a silk robe, but his eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like a man who was watching a burning building and trying to figure out how to sell the ashes. "This is different, Isaac," he said. "This makes it faster. If you sign this, I will let you stay in the guest house. You can garden. You can live out your days in peace. If you do not sign it, I will have Dr. Sterling upgrade Nia diagnosis." I froze. Upgrade. What does that mean? I asked, my voice low. Preston smiled. It was a thin, cruel stretching of his lips. "Right now she is diagnosed with temporary hysteria," he said, examining his fingernails. "But Dr. Sterling thinks she might be showing signs of early-onset schizophrenia. It runs in families, you know. If she is diagnosed, she will need to be committed to a secure facility. For her own safety, of course. They have heavy sedation protocols there. She might not even remember who you are after a few months of treatment." My blood boiled. I wanted to stand up and wrap my hands around his throat. I wanted to squeeze until that smug look disappeared forever. But I stayed seated. Violence is what he wanted. Violence would prove I was the crazy old man he claimed I was. I took a deep breath. I forced my heart rate to slow down. I needed to get out of this room. I needed to get to Richard's study. I needed the proof I had heard them arguing about through the vents. I cannot sign this without my reading glasses. I lied. They are in my jacket pocket. The police took my jacket. Preston rolled his eyes. "Use mine." "I cannot," I said, my hands shaking with feigned tremors. "I have astigmatism, Preston. If I sign this and the signature does not match my bank records, the transfer will be flagged for fraud. You know how banks are. They are suspicious of everything these days." Preston hesitated. He knew I was right. He needed this to be clean. "Fine," he snapped. "I will go get your jacket from the sheriff car. Do not move." "Wait," I said, standing up and grabbing my cane. "While you do that, I need to use the restroom." Preston looked at the bucket in the corner of the room. "Use the bucket." "I am 72 years old, Preston," I said, channeling every ounce of dignity I had left. "I have prostate issues. If I try to use a bucket, I will make a mess, and your mother will have to clean it up. Do you really want to explain that to Catherine?" Preston groaned. He looked at me with pure disgust, the disgust of a young man who thinks he will never be old. "Fine," he spat. "Go upstairs. Use the guest bathroom in the hallway. You have 3 minutes. If you wander off, I will break your other leg." He turned and marched up the stairs to go outside and deal with the sheriff. I waited until I heard the heavy front door close. Then I moved. I did not go to the bathroom. I went straight for the heavy oak door at the end of the hall, the study. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The room smelled of expensive cigars and leather. It was a shrine to Richard Caldwell's ego. There were photos of him shaking hands with senators, photos of him on yachts and hunting trophies mounted on the walls. But I was not looking at the trophies, I was looking at the structure. I scanned the room. A structural engineer knows that people hide their most valuable possessions in the strongest part of the house. They put safes in load-bearing walls because the framing is thicker. I walked to the east wall. It was an interior wall sharing a spine with the chimney. It was the strongest point in the room. There was a large oil painting of a fox hunt hanging there. It was slightly crooked. I walked over and tapped the drywall next to the painting. Thud. Hollow. I tapped the center of the painting. Clunk. Solid. I lifted the heavy frame. There it was, a wall safe. It was a sophisticated digital model. I had no tools to crack it, and I did not have the combination. I cursed under my breath. The ledger had to be in there. I looked around the room frantically. I needed something, anything. My eyes fell on the mahogany desk in the center of the room. It was cluttered with papers. I shuffled through them. Nothing but invitations to charity galas and golf club newsletters. I opened the drawers. Locked. I was running out of time. Preston would be back any second. I turned to leave defeated. And then I saw it. The wastebasket. It was a beautiful leather-bound trash can tucked under the desk, and it was overflowing. Rich people are arrogant. They shred the documents they think are important, but they throw the ones that scare them into the trash because they want them out of sight. They think if they throw it away, the problem disappears. I knelt down. My bad knee screamed in protest, but I ignored it. I pulled out a crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out. It was a letter from the First National Bank of Texas. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. I scanned the numbers. My eyes widened. The Caldwell Trust was not just broke. They were $12 million in debt. They had leveraged everything. The house, the cars, even the construction equipment. I dug deeper. I found another paper. This one was handwritten. It was a list of names and numbers. Next to each name was a sum. Martinez Cartel, $2 million. Due Friday. My hands trembled. This was it. This was why they were so desperate for my land. They were not building condos. They needed my land to pay off a drug cartel before they got executed. I folded the papers and shoved them into my back pocket. This was the ammunition I needed. This proved they were acting under duress. This proved the fraud. I turned to the door. I reached for the handle, but the handle turned before I could touch it. The door swung open. Preston stood there. He was holding my jacket in one hand. In the other hand, he was holding a black 9mm pistol. He looked at me. He looked at the painting I had left crooked on the wall. He looked at the trash can I had overturned. His face went pale. Then it went red. "You nosy old rat," Preston whispered. He kicked the door shut behind him. He raised the gun. The barrel looked like a dark tunnel leading straight to hell. "Give me the papers, Isaac," he said, his voice shaking with rage. I stood my ground. I could feel the crinkle of the foreclosure notice in my pocket against my hip. "You are done, Preston," I said, my voice steady. I saw the numbers. "You do not own this house. You do not own anything. You are just a squatter in a suit." Preston cocked the gun. The click was loud in the silent room. "I said, give me the papers," he screamed, "or I will paint this wall with your brains and tell the sheriff you attacked me." I looked at the gun. I looked at the man holding it. A structural engineer knows that when a beam is under too much pressure, it does not bend. It snaps. Preston was snapping, and I was standing in the debris zone. Preston's hand was shaking so hard the gun barrel vibrated like a tuning fork. I stood there watching his finger twitch on the trigger. I was looking death in the face, but my mind was still working like an engineer. I calculated the trajectory. I calculated the noise. I calculated the mess. "You are not going to shoot me, Preston," I said, my voice calm in the suffocating silence of the study. "Shut up," he hissed, but he lowered the weapon slightly. "If you shoot me, you have a murder investigation," I continued. "You have forensics, you have ballistics, you have a body to dispose of. You do not have the time or the stomach for that. You are a businessman, Preston, not a butcher." Preston looked at the gun, then he looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He was doing his own calculations. He realized I was right. A bullet was too loud. A bullet was evidence. But an accident is quiet. An accident is tragedy. An accident is convenient. He shoved the gun into the waistband of his pants. A cruel smile spread across his face. "You are right, Isaac," he said, stepping closer. "Shooting you is messy. But old men fall all the time. Their bones are brittle. Their balance is bad, especially when they are wandering around a strange house in the middle of the dark. He lunged at me. I tried to raise my cane, but he was too fast and I was too tired. He grabbed the lapels of my jacket and shoved me backward. I stumbled out of the study door into the hallway. My bad leg gave way. I flailed my arms trying to grab the doorframe, but my fingers slipped on the polished wood. I fell. The staircase was right behind me. I felt gravity take hold. It is a force I have spent my whole life fighting against with steel and concrete. But this time, gravity won. I tumbled backward. The world became a blur of spinning lights and hard impacts. My shoulder hit the banister. My head cracked against a step. I heard the sickening snap of bone before I felt the pain. I landed at the bottom of the stairs in a heap on the marble floor. The pain was white hot. It started in my right leg and shot up my spine like an electric current. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. I looked down. My leg was twisted at an angle that nature never intended. The femur had snapped. I looked up the long staircase. Preston stood at the top looking down at me like a god judging a sinner. He did not look horrified. He looked relieved. He took a deep breath. He ruffled his hair to make it look messy. He untucked his shirt. Then he started screaming, "Help! Someone help!" Ideally, he fell. "Oh my God, someone call 911. I wanted to laugh at his performance, but the darkness was closing in. The pain was pulling me under. The last thing I saw was Preston running down the stairs, kneeling beside me and whispering in my ear, "Rest easy, Isaac. I will take good care of the land." Then the lights went out. When I woke up, the world was white and smelled of rubbing alcohol. The steady beep of a monitor was the only sound in the room. I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea pushed me back into the pillows. My leg was encased in a heavy plaster cast suspended in a sling. My head was bandaged. I looked around. I was in a private hospital room. It was nice. Too nice. It was the kind of room they put you in when they want to keep you quiet. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear voices in the hallway. "It is a tragedy, really." It was Preston's voice. He sounded choked up, heartbroken. "He has been deteriorating for months, doctor. We tried to keep him at the estate for his own safety. I told him not to use the stairs. But he got confused. He thought he was back in his own house. He was looking for his wife. She died 10 years ago. I tried to speak to shout that he was a liar, but my throat was dry as sandpaper. I see, a second voice said. It sounded authoritative. "A doctor." "The break is severe, Mr. Caldwell. At his age, recovery will be difficult, and given his mental state, we need to discuss long-term care. He cannot live alone anymore." "Exactly," Preston said. "That is what I have been saying. I have the power of attorney here. Once he is stable, I want to transfer him to the Sunset Hills facility. They have a memory care unit that is very secure." "No," I rasped. The voices stopped. Preston walked into the room, followed by a tall man in a white coat. Preston's eyes were red. He looked like the perfect grieving son-in-law. "Isaac," Preston said, rushing to my bedside. "Oh, thank God you are awake. You gave us such a scare." He patted my hand. His grip was tight, a warning. I pulled my hand away. "You pushed me," I croaked, looking at the doctor. He pushed me down the stairs. The doctor sighed and made a note on his clipboard. He looked at me with pity. "Mr. Robinson, you had a fall," the doctor said gently. "You were confused. You wandered out of your room at night." He pushed me. I repeated, my voice gaining a little strength. "He is trying to steal my land. Check his pockets. He has the foreclosure notice." Preston shook his head, looking at the doctor with tears in his eyes. "You see," Preston whispered, "the paranoia, it is getting worse. He thinks everyone is stealing from him. Last week he accused the mailman of being a spy." The doctor nodded sympathetically. "I understand. The trauma of the fall has likely exacerbated his condition. I will order a sedative to help him rest." "No," I shouted, struggling to sit up. "I do not need a sedative. I need the police. I need my daughter. Where is Nia?" "Nia is resting," Isaac Preston said soothingly. "She is devastated. She is not in a state to see you right now. She agreed that Sunset Hills is the best place for you." "You are lying," I spat. Preston turned to the doctor. "Please, doctor." He is agitated. It hurts to see him like this. "I will get the nurse," the doctor said, patting Preston's shoulder. "You are doing the right thing, Mr. Caldwell. It is never easy." The doctor left. Preston leaned in close. His sad face vanished instantly, replaced by a smirk. "Nice try, old man," he whispered. "But nobody believes a senile man with a brain injury. By the time you get out of this bed, Robinson Hills will be a gravel pit and I will be in the Bahamas." He patted my cheek. "Enjoy the pudding, Isaac. It is the only thing you are going to be chewing for a while." He walked out, leaving me alone with the beeping machine. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles. I counted them. 12 across, 12 down, 144 tiles. I was trapped. My leg was broken, my reputation was destroyed, my daughter was a prisoner, and my enemy held all the cards. Most men would have given up. Most men would have closed their eyes and let the sedative take them away. But I am not most men. I am a builder. And when a builder faces a wall, he does not turn around. He finds a hammer. The door opened again. I expected the doctor with a needle. Instead, a nurse walked in. She was a large woman with skin the color of deep mahogany and kind eyes that had seen too much trouble to be easily fooled. She moved with a quiet efficiency, checking the monitors, adjusting the drip. She picked up my chart and frowned. Dementia, she read out loud. Paranoia. Propensity for violence. She looked at me. She looked deep into my eyes. She did not see a crazy person. She saw a man who was terrified and angry. She walked around the bed to check my IV line. As she leaned over, I caught the scent of cocoa butter and peppermint. It was a smell from my childhood. "Mr. Robinson," she said softly, "you need to calm down. Your blood pressure is through the roof." "I am not crazy," I whispered. I grabbed her wrist. "Please, you have to believe me." She looked at my hand on her wrist. She did not pull away. She looked at my face again, studying my features like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Wait a minute," she said. She narrowed her eyes. "Are you Isaac Robinson?" "From the East Side. The one who used to run the structural repair shop on Martin Luther King Boulevard?" "Yes," I said, surprised. "That was my shop. I closed it 5 years ago." The nurse hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, my Lord," she whispered. "Uncle Ike." I blinked. "Excuse me, you do not remember me," she said, a smile breaking through her professional mask. "I am Sarah. Sarah Jenkins. My daddy was Thomas Jenkins, the bus driver." The fog in my brain cleared. Thomas Jenkins. A good man. He died 10 years ago. "Thomas," I said. "The blue house on 4th Street. The porch collapsed in 98. "Yes," Sarah said, her eyes filling with tears. "The contractor wanted $5,000 to fix it. We did not have 500. You came over on a Sunday with your crew. You rebuilt that entire porch. You reinforced the roof. And when my daddy tried to pay you, you told him to use the money to buy me school books." I remembered. A little girl with braided hair sitting on the steps reading a biology textbook while we hammered wood. "You were the girl with the books," I said. "And you are the man who made sure I had a safe place to read them," she said. "I am a nurse now because of you, Uncle Ike." She squeezed my hand. Her grip was strong. "Why are these people saying you are crazy?" she asked, lowering her voice. "I heard that man in the hallway. He does not smell right to me." "He is not right." "Sarah," I said. "He pushed me down those stairs. He is trying to steal my farm. He has my daughter trapped. And he has my phone. I cannot call anyone." Sarah's face hardened. The kindness remained, but underneath it I saw the steel of a woman who grew up on the East Side. "He is trying to play you," she said. "He is winning," I said. "Unless I can make a call." "Sarah, I need a favor. And it is a big one. It could cost you your job." She did not hesitate. "My daddy taught me that when someone fixes your porch, you do not ask questions." "When they need a hammer," she said. "What do you need?" "I need a phone," I said. "Not the room phone. He will be monitoring the logs. I need a cell phone, a burner, something untraceable." Sarah checked the hallway. The coast was clear. "I get off shift in 20 minutes, she whispered. "There is a bodega across the street. They sell prepaid phones. I do not have any cash," I said, feeling the shame burn my cheeks. They took my wallet. Sarah reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. "Consider it a down payment on the porch," she said. She tucked the money back into her pocket. "I will be back in 30 minutes, she said. "Pretend you are asleep. When I come in to change your dressing, I will slide it under your pillow." "Thank you, Sarah," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means." She walked to the door and looked back at me. "I know exactly what it means," she said. "It means the foundation is still strong. We just need to reinforce the walls." She walked out. I lay back on the pillows. The pain in my leg was still there, but the panic was gone. Preston Caldwell thought he had isolated me. He thought he had cut off all my lines of communication. But he forgot one thing. You cannot isolate a man who has spent 50 years building bridges. I had built a bridge to the Jenkins family 20 years ago with a hammer and a box of nails. And today, that bridge just saved my life. I closed my eyes and waited. The engineer was back online. The cheap plastic prepaid phone felt like a diamond in my hand. It was a $20 piece of junk from a corner store, but right now it was the most valuable tool I owned. Sarah had slipped it under my pillow while pretending to fluff it. She had risked her job for me. I could not let that risk be for nothing. I waited until the night nurse did her rounds. Her rubber-soled shoes squeaked away down the hall, fading into silence. I pulled the blanket over my head, creating a small, dark tent. The blue light of the phone screen illuminated my face. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed. I did not need to look up the number. I have a mind for numbers, coordinates, load capacities, phone numbers of the people who matter. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" The voice was groggy. It was 3 in the morning. "Marcus," I whispered. "It is Mr. Robinson." There was a pause, then the sound of rustling sheets and a sudden alertness. "Mr. Robinson, is that you? I saw the news. They said you had a fall. They said you were in a coma or something. They say a lot of things." "Marcus," I said, my voice rasped from the pain medication but steady as a steel beam. "Listen to me carefully, son. I did not fall. I was pushed. And I am not in a coma. I am in a prison disguised as a hospital. Mr. Robinson." Marcus breathed. "What is going on?" "Do you have your laptop?" I asked. "I always have my laptop." "Boot it up," I said. "We are going to work." I heard the familiar chime of a computer starting up. I closed my eyes, and for a second I was not in a hospital bed. I was back in the heat of a Texas summer 15 years ago, standing on a construction site with a skinny kid named Marcus Washington. Marcus had been a troubled kid back then. His father was gone and his mother was working 3 jobs. He was angry at the world. He had been caught spray painting graffiti on one of my retaining walls. The police wanted to charge him. I told them to give him to me instead. I remembered the day I taught him how to use a theodolite, the precision instrument we use for surveying. He was impatient. He wanted to rush through the measurements so he could go home. I had put my hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, look at the bubble level," I had told him. "It is off by a hair." "So what?" Marcus had sneered. "It is just an inch." I had forced him to look through the lens. "An inch here is 10 feet over there," I had said, pointing to the distant marker. "If you are off by an inch at the foundation, the roof will miss the walls by a mile. You want to bring a building down, you do not need a wrecking ball. You just need a little bit of bad math at the bottom." Marcus had looked at me, then really looked at me. It was the first time anyone had taught him that precision mattered, that he mattered. He went on to get a scholarship to MIT. He traded his spray cans for code. Now he was one of the best forensic data analysts in the state. He found cracks in digital foundations. I opened my eyes. "I am in, Mr. Robinson." Marcus said, his voice crisp and professional. "What are we looking for?" "I need you to look into a company called Sterling Development," I said, "and the Caldwell Trust. I want to know everything. Assets, liabilities, shell companies, tax returns." Preston Caldwell, Marcus asked. "The guy who is marrying Nia." "The guy who kidnapped Nia," I corrected him. "He claims he is a billionaire developer. He claims he is building luxury condos on my land, but I saw a foreclosure notice in his trash can. I need you to find the truth, Marcus. Dig deep. Do not look at the walls. Look at the foundation." I heard the rapid clacking of keys. It sounded like a machine gun. "Give me 10 minutes, Marcus said. "Stay on the line." I lay there listening to the silence on the other end. My leg was throbbing a deep, dull ache that radiated from my hip to my toes. But I welcomed the pain. Pain meant I was alive. I thought about Preston. He was probably sleeping soundly in his silk sheets thinking he had won. He thought power came from money and connections. He did not understand that real power comes from loyalty. He had bought his allies. I had built mine. Time stretched. The air conditioning vent above me hummed. I thought about the soil samples under the north pasture, the secret I had buried there, the secret Preston was about to dig up. If Marcus found what I thought he would find, it would be the detonator. Mr. Robinson. Marcus' voice came back on the line. But it was different. It was tight, scared. I am here, Marcus. What did you find? Marcus let out a shaky breath. Mr. Robinson, you need to get the police. Like real police. FBI level. Talk to me, son. Sterling Development does not exist, Marcus said, speaking fast. It is a ghost. No physical address, no employees, no construction permits. It is just a mailing address in the Cayman Islands. I knew it, I whispered. But that is not the bad part, Marcus continued. I hacked into the Caldwell Trust Bank records. Mr. Robinson, they are not just broke. They are negative. $12 million in the hole. I saw the notice, I said. They are facing foreclosure. It is worse than foreclosure, Marcus said. I traced the incoming transfers from the last 6 months. They have been receiving massive deposits from a shell company in Juarez, Mexico. 500,000 here, $1 million there, and then immediately wiring it out to construction vendors that do not exist. I felt a cold chill settle in my stomach. Laundering, I said. Big time, Marcus said. They are cleaning money for the Martinez cartel. I recognized the digital signature of the shell company. It is the same network the feds busted in El Paso last year. Preston and his father are not developers. They are a wash cycle for drug money. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. The desperation, the rush to get married, the threats, the gun. They were not trying to build condos. They were trying to use my land as a new front. A remote location to bury money or worse. And Mr. Robinson Marcus' voice dropped to a whisper. I see the withdrawal schedule. They missed a payment to Juarez last week. $2 million. That was the number on the paper I saw in the trash can. What happens when you miss a payment to the cartel, I asked, even though I knew the answer. They kill you, Marcus said. And they kill anyone standing next to you. My blood ran cold. Naya. She was in that house. She was sleeping under the same roof as men who were marked for death. If the cartel came to collect, they would not check ID cards. They would burn the whole place down. Mr. Robinson Marcus said urgently. There is one more thing. I see a new wire transfer set up. It is pending. What is it? I asked, gripping the phone. It is a transfer of deed, Marcus said. For Robinson Hills. It is scheduled to execute at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, as soon as the banks open. They are transferring your land directly to the cartel shell company. They are paying their debt with my farm, I realized. They are handing over 500 acres of secluded land to a Mexican drug lord. I said, my voice trembling with rage. They are not just stealing my home. They are turning it into a fortress for criminals. And once that transfer goes through, Marcus said, the cartel will own it. You will never get it back. And if you try to fight them, I know, I said. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3:15. The banks opened in less than 6 hours. Naya was in the house. The deed was in the system. The cartel was waiting. Marcus, I said, can you stop the transfer? I can try to freeze it, Marcus said. But I need authorization, or I need to trigger a fraud alert. But since Preston has the power of attorney, his digital signature is valid. The system thinks he is you. Then we have to make the system realize he is not me, I said. How? Marcus asked. I need you to send everything you found to Agent Miller, I said. Not the sheriff. The FBI agent in Houston. Do you have a contact? I can find one, Marcus said. But Mr. Robinson, if I send this, the feds will raid the Caldwell estate. It will turn into a war zone. If Nia is in there... I closed my eyes. I pictured my daughter. I pictured the fear in her eyes at the altar. She is already in a war zone, I said. We just need to give her a weapon. Marcus, I said, do one more thing for me. Anything, Mr. Robinson. Hack into the security system of the Caldwell estate, I said. I know they have cameras. I need to know where Nia is. And I need to know where Preston is keeping his phone. Why the phone? Marcus asked. Because I said, I am going to make a call that is going to bring the whole house of cards down, but I need to make sure my daughter is not standing under it when it falls. I heard the typing start again. I am in, Marcus said. I see the floor plan. I see the cameras. Mr. Robinson. Nia is not in the guest room. My heart stopped. Where is she? She is in the study, Marcus said. And she is not alone. Preston is in there. And, oh God, what is it, Marcus? What do you see? He has a needle, Marcus whispered. He is injecting something into her arm. I threw the blanket off. I forgot the pain. I forgot the broken leg. I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the bed. The agony was blinding, but I did not care. Call the feds, I roared into the phone. Tell them to bring a SWAT team. Tell them the cartel is coming. I hung up. I looked at my cast. It was heavy plaster. An anchor. I grabbed the metal IV pole standing next to my bed. I smashed the heavy base against the plaster. Crack. It didn't break. I hit it again. And again. I am coming, Nia, I growled. I was not a structural engineer anymore. I was a father, and I was about to tear the world apart to get to my child. I was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed when the door flew open. I had hidden the IV pole I had smashed against my cast. To the naked eye, I looked like a broken man. My leg was suspended in a sling. My face was bruised from the fall. My eyes were red from lack of sleep. But inside, I was as cold and hard as the granite bedrock under my ranch. Preston Caldwell stormed into the room. He was not the polished groom anymore. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie was loosened. He smelled of nervous sweat and stale adrenaline. He checked his watch. It was 8:30 in the morning. The banks opened in 30 minutes. He threw a folder onto the rolling tray table and kicked it toward me. The wheels squeaked loudly in the quiet room. "Sign it," he barked. I looked at the folder. I did not need to open it to know what it was. It was the deed transfer, the final nail in the coffin of my legacy. "Where is Nia?" I asked, my voice raspy. Preston leaned over the bed. His eyes were wild. He looked like a man who was hearing footsteps behind him. "She is in the car," he lied. I know he was lying. Marcus had told me she was in the study. But I played along. "She is waiting for you," Preston continued. "You sign this paper and I take you to her. You do not sign it and I make a call to Dr. Sterling. He is standing by with the commitment papers. Once he signs them, Nia goes into the lockdown ward. No visitors, no phone calls, just white walls and medication." He pulled a pen from his pocket and clicked it. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Do not test me, Isaac," he hissed. "I am out of patience." I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. Expensive, heavy, the kind of pen a man uses to sign treaties, not death warrants. I reached out with my right hand. My arm trembled. I let my hand drop to the mattress. "I cannot," I whispered. "My arm. It is numb. The fall must have pinched a nerve." Preston let out a frustrated growl. He grabbed my right hand and shook it roughly. "Stop acting," he shouted. "You are fine." I winced, letting out a sharp cry of pain. "It hurts, Preston," I gasped. "I cannot hold the pen." Preston looked at the clock on the wall. 8:35. The cartel deadline was looming. He did not have time to argue. He did not have time to find a notary or a witness. He needed ink on paper right now. "Use your other hand," he snapped. I looked at my left hand, my non-dominant hand, the hand I used to hold the nail while I hammered with the right. "It will be messy," I said softly. "I do not care if it looks like a chicken scratched it," Preston yelled, shoving the pen into my left hand. "Just spell your name correctly." I gripped the pen. It felt awkward, unnatural. I looked at the document, the lines of text blurred together. Transfer of title, Grantor Isaac Robinson, Grantee Sterling Development, LLC. I lowered the pen to the signature line. Most people think a signature is just a formality. But for an engineer, a signature is a seal of integrity. When I sign a blueprint, I am promising that the building will stand. I am promising that lives will be safe. But this signature was different. This was a trap. I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper. I let my hand shake. I made the loops of the I and the R jagged and uneven. I dragged the pen across the paper, creating a signature that looked nothing like the bold, confident autograph I had used for 50 years. It looked like the scrawl of a man under extreme duress, or the scribble of a man who was medicated and confused, or perhaps a forgery. That was the key. By signing with my left hand, I was creating a forensic anomaly. In a court of law, a handwriting expert would look at this and say it did not match my natural motion. They would say it was forced. They would say it was suspect. Preston was so desperate for the land he did not see the structural flaw I was building into the contract. He only saw the ink. I finished the signature with a shaky line and dropped the pen. There I whispered, sinking back into the pillows. It is done. Now let me see my daughter. Preston snatched the paper away. He blew on the ink even though it was already dry. A look of pure ecstasy washed over his face. He held the document up to the light, admiring it like it was a winning lottery ticket. He laughed. It was a loud, manic sound that made my skin crawl. You actually did it, he said, shaking his head. You actually gave it up. He folded the document and shoved it into his inner jacket pocket right next to his heart. Or where his heart should have been. I kept my promise, Preston, I said, watching him. Now keep yours. Take me to Nia. Preston stopped laughing. He looked down at me. The smile remained, but the eyes went dead. Oh, Isaac, he said, chuckling softly. You really are a senile old fool, aren't you? He smoothed his lapel. I am not taking you to Nia, he said. I am taking this to the bank. And then I am wiring the money to my partners. And then I am going to the airport. But you said... I started to protest. I lied, Preston interrupted. That is what businessmen do, Isaac. We lie. We cheat. We win. He walked to the door. He put his hand on the handle and turned back to look at me one last time. And do not worry about the ranch, he said, his voice dripping with venom. I know how much you love that dirt. I know you spent 40 years playing cowboy out there. He sneered. But frankly, Isaac, it is an eyesore. That old farmhouse is rotting. The barn is falling down. It looks like a dump. He tapped his pocket where the deed was. My partners have big plans for it. By next week, there will not be a blade of grass left. We are going to strip it down to the bedrock. We are going to dig until there is nothing left but a hole in the ground. He laughed again. I am going to bulldoze that pigsty you call a home, Isaac. And I am going to enjoy every second of it. He opened the door. Goodbye, Grandpa, he said. Try not to fall out of bed again. The door clicked shut. I lay in the silence. The insult hung in the air. Pigsty. He called the home where I raised my daughter a pigsty. He called the land where my wife is buried a dump. He thought he had broken me. He thought he had just walked out with a fortune. But he was wrong. He had just walked out with a time bomb in his pocket. I waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. I sat up. I reached for the cheap burner phone I had hidden under the mattress. I dialed the number. Marcus answered on the first ring. Did he sign it? Marcus asked, breathless. He signed it. I said, my voice cold and hard. Or at least he thinks he did. Is he leaving the hospital? Marcus asked. He is heading to the bank, I said. He has the paper. He is going to initiate the transfer at 9 sharp. Mr. Robinson. Marcus said, his voice trembling. The FBI agent is asking for the go-ahead. They have a team ready. But if we do this, there is no turning back. Once Preston walks into that bank with a fraudulent document... Wait, I said. I looked at the door where Preston had just left. I thought about his smile. I thought about his promise to bulldoze my home. Do not arrest him at the bank, I said. Marcus paused. What? Why? Because that is too easy, I said. If they arrest him at the bank, he is just a man with a piece of paper. He will claim he did not know. He will claim it was a misunderstanding. He has expensive lawyers, Marcus. They will plea bargain him down to a misdemeanor. Then what do we do? Marcus asked. We let him execute the transfer, I said. But Mr. Robinson, Marcus cried. If the transfer goes through, the cartel gets the land. No, I said. The cartel gets the land only if the land is worth something. But Preston forgot one thing. What is that? Marcus asked. He forgot to check the environmental survey, I said. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The pain was still there, but now it was just background noise. Marcus, I said, call the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA, Marcus asked, confused. Why? Tell them you have an anonymous tip, I said. Tell them that there is an illegal hazardous waste site buried under the north pasture of the Robinson Hills estate. Tell them that the containment seal has been breached by unauthorized digging, Mr. Robinson, Marcus stammered. But you cleaned that up years ago. You told me you sealed it with concrete. I did, I said. But Preston does not know that. And the EPA does not know that. When they get that call, they will red flag the property immediately. They will freeze the title. They will declare it a Superfund site. I smiled. It was the smile of a predator. Do you know what happens to the value of a property when it gets declared a toxic waste zone, Marcus? It drops to zero, Marcus whispered. Exactly, I said. Let Preston transfer the deed, I said. Let him wire the deed to the cartel. Let him think he has paid his debt. And then I said, watch what happens when a drug lord realizes he just traded $2 million of debt for a worthless piece of poisoned dirt. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then I heard a low whistle. That is cold, Mr. Robinson, Marcus said. That is ice cold. Preston wanted to play dirty, I said, gripping the phone. I am just changing the game. He wants to dig a hole. Fine. I am going to make sure he never climbs out of it. Make the call, Marcus, and then call the feds. Tell them to meet me at the house. You are going to the house, Marcus asked, with a broken leg. I am not going to the house, I said, standing up on my good leg and grabbing the IV pole for support. I am going to a demolition. The discharge papers were still sitting in the trash can of room 304. I did not wait for the doctor to sign them. I did not wait for the wheelchair assistants. I walked out of that hospital on a broken leg and a cocktail of adrenaline and rage. The pain was a dull roar in the background of my mind, but I pushed it down. A structural engineer knows that sometimes you have to shore up a damaged wall just long enough to finish the job. I did not go home. Home was currently occupied by an invading army. Instead, I took a taxi to the one place Preston Caldwell would never think to look. The County Hall of Records. The building was a dusty limestone fortress in the center of town. It smelled of old paper and bureaucratic indifference. I hobbled up the steps, my cast thumping against the marble, my IV pole replaced by a cheap wooden cane Sarah had bought me from the hospital gift shop. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was a young woman with purple hair and a look that said she would rather be anywhere else. She looked at my torn hospital gown tucked into my pants. She looked at the sweat on my forehead. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, without looking up from her phone. "I need the geological survey maps for Sector 4, I said, my voice raspy. Specifically, the military surveys from 1952. She finally looked up. Her eyes widened. "Sector 4, she said. "That is the old Robinson property. Those records are archived in the basement. You need a permit to access them." "I am Isaac Robinson," I said, slamming my driver license on the counter. "I am the permit. Get me those maps." Something in my voice made her stop chewing her gum. She nodded slowly and disappeared into the back. While I waited, I closed my eyes and pictured my ranch. At that exact moment, I knew exactly what was happening there. 5 miles away, Preston Caldwell was turning my sanctuary into a circus. My ranch, Robinson Hills, was usually a place of quiet dignity. It was where my wife Beatrice had planted her rose garden. It was where Naya had learned to ride a bike. It was where I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the oak trees. But today, it was a stage for Preston vanity. Preston had not wasted a second. As soon as he left the hospital with that forged signature, he had made the calls. He had hired a catering company. He had hired a band. He had invited every high-roller investor and shady hedge fund manager in Texas to come and see his new acquisition. He was throwing a victory party on land he did not truly own yet. I could see it in my mind's eye. The black limousines kicking up dust on my gravel driveway. The high heels sinking into the soft soil of the north pasture. The smell of expensive cigars overpowering the scent of the wildflowers. And Nia. My heart ached for her. She was trapped in the middle of it. Back at the ranch, the party was in full swing. Preston stood on my front porch holding a glass of vintage champagne. He was wearing a fresh suit, looking like the king of the world. He had draped a banner across the front of my house. It read, "The future home of Caldwell Quarries." He raised his glass to the crowd of 50 men standing on my lawn. "Gentlemen," Preston shouted, his voice booming over the chatter, "look at this view. You see grass. I see granite. You see a farm. I see the largest supply of high-grade construction stone in the state. By this time next month, these hills will be gone and your bank accounts will be overflowing." The investors clapped. They cheered. They did not care about the history of the land. They only cared about the return on investment. Naya was standing next to Preston. She was wearing a dress he had bought for her. It was too short, too tight, and completely not her style. She looked like a doll he had taken out of a box. Preston wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. His fingers dug into her side, a silent warning. "Smile, darling," he whispered in her ear. "You look like you are at a funeral." "I am at a funeral," Nia whispered back through gritted teeth. "You are burying my father home." Preston laughed. He turned to the crowd. "My beautiful wife, everyone. She is a little emotional today. Letting go of her childhood home is hard, but she knows it is for the best. We are building a future here." He kissed her on the cheek. To the crowd it looked affectionate, but Nia flinched. She scanned the crowd looking for a friendly face, looking for a way out. But there was no one. Just Preston's security guards standing at the perimeter, arms crossed, watching her every move. She was a prisoner in the house she grew up in. Back at the Hall of Records, the clerk returned. She was carrying a large leather-bound folio covered in a layer of gray dust. "Here it is," she said, sneezing. "Nobody has asked for this in 30 years. I opened the book. The binding cracked loud in the quiet room. I turned the pages. 1948, 1949, 1950. And then I found it. It was a hand-drawn map from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It detailed the topography of the land that would eventually become Robinson Hills. But there was a section marked in red ink, a large oval shape right in the middle of the north pasture. Inside the red oval were words that made my heart race. Site B, Chemical Munitions Disposal, sealed. Do not disturb. I traced the lines with my finger. I remembered when I bought the land. The seller had been desperate. He had told me there were old rumors about the Army using the land for storage, but he said it was just rusty trucks. I had done my own testing. I had found traces of chemicals deep in the soil. I knew that if I dug too deep, I would release a toxic nightmare. So I had done what any good engineer would do. I built a containment sarcophagus. I poured 5 feet of reinforced concrete over the site, then covered it with 10 feet of clean topsoil. I planted grass. I turned a hazard into a pasture. I saved that land. And now Preston was about to crack it open like an egg. I pulled out my burner phone. I took a picture of the map. The resolution was grainy, but the red ink was clear. I looked at the clerk. "I need a certified copy of this page," I said, "and I need you to notarize it, now." She looked at my face. She saw the sweat, the pain, and the fire in my eyes. She did not argue. She hurried to the copier. I walked out of the Hall of Records 10 minutes later with the certified map tucked inside my sling. My leg was throbbing so hard I was seeing spots, but I did not stop. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Robinson Hills," I said, "and do not spare the horses." We drove out of the city, leaving the pavement behind. The road turned to dirt. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the fields. As we got closer, I could hear the music. A jazz band was playing a lively tune. It sounded grotesque against the backdrop of the impending destruction. We rounded the final bend. I saw them. The cars were parked in rows on my hayfield, crushing the winter wheat I had planted last month. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. People were laughing, drinking, eating canapes on my porch. Preston was standing on a makeshift podium near the barn. He was holding a microphone. And this Preston shouted, pointing to a massive yellow bulldozer parked next to the rose garden. "This is the first step. Tomorrow morning at dawn we break ground. We are going to tear this old barn down and start the excavation." The crowd cheered. I told the taxi driver to stop at the gate. He looked at the security guards blocking the entrance. "You are not on the list, buddy," the driver said. "They are not going to let you in." I opened the door and stepped out. I adjusted my sling. I gripped my cane. "I am the list," I said. I walked up to the gate, the same gate where I had surrendered to the sheriff yesterday. The security guard stepped forward. He was a new guy. He did not recognize me. "Private party, sir," he said, holding up a hand. "Invitation only." I did not stop walking. "I am Isaac Robinson," I said. "I own this dirt, and I am here to crash the party." The guard hesitated. He looked at my broken leg. He looked at the fire in my eyes. I walked past him. I walked up the long driveway. My cane tapped a steady rhythm on the gravel. Thud, thud, thud. The music stopped. One by one, the guests turned around. The laughter died. The chatter faded. Preston was still on the podium. He froze. The microphone dropped to his side. Nia gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. I kept walking. I did not look at the investors. I did not look at the bulldozer. I looked straight at Preston Caldwell. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He thought I was in a hospital bed, heavily sedated, helpless. He did not know that you cannot sedate the truth. I reached the bottom of the porch steps. I was in pain, I was exhausted, I was outnumbered. But I had a map in my pocket, and I had a lesson to teach. Preston recovered his composure. He laughed nervously. "Well, well," he said into the microphone. "Look who decided to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for my father-in-law. He is a little confused, but he wanted to see the future. He gestured for the security guards to come get me. Escort him to a chair, Preston ordered. He looks like he is about to collapse. I raised my cane, pointing it at his chest. I am not collapsing, Preston, I shouted, my voice ringing out across the silent yard. And neither is this house. But your scheme. That is about to come down like a house of cards, Preston sneered. Get him out of here, he hissed to the guards. 2 large men grabbed my arms. I shook them off with a strength that surprised them. I pulled the certified map from my sling. I held it up high for everyone to see. You want to dig Preston, I asked. You want to strip mine this land. I took a step up the stairs. Go ahead, I said. But before you start that bulldozer, you might want to explain to your investors why you are selling them a federal toxic waste site. The silence that followed was absolute. The investors looked at each other. The smiles vanished. Preston's face turned the color of ash. What are you talking about? He stammered. I am talking about the truth, I said, climbing another step. I am talking about the ground you are standing on. And I am talking about the end of your little game. The silence in the yard was heavy, but Preston Caldwell was a master of breaking tension. He did not panic. He did not scream. He simply laughed. It was a loud, practiced laugh that rolled over the crowd like a wave of reassurance. He clapped his hands together, shaking his head as if I had just told a joke that only he understood. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston shouted, his voice booming through the microphone. You have to forgive my father-in-law. He has had a very difficult week. The dementia comes and goes. Sometimes he thinks he is a structural engineer. Sometimes he thinks he is a lawyer. Tonight, it seems he thinks he is an environmental inspector. The crowd chuckled nervously. They wanted to believe him. They wanted the free champagne and the promise of millions to be real. It is human nature to ignore the fire alarm if the music is loud enough. Preston walked down the steps of the porch. He moved with the grace of a predator. He signaled the security guards to stand back. He wanted to handle this himself. He wanted to show his investors that he was in control of the beast. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. He was tall, young, and strong. I was bent over my cane, my leg throbbing in a cast, my clothes stained with hospital sweat. To the world, it looked like a mismatch. It looked like a lion standing over a wounded gazelle. But the gazelle was wearing a wire. Inside the breast pocket of my jacket, the cheap burner phone Sarah had bought me was recording. I had started the voice memo app the moment I stepped out of the taxi. Preston leaned in close. He put a hand on my shoulder. To the audience, it looked like a comforting gesture, a son consoling a confused father. You should have stayed in bed, Isaac Preston whispered, his voice low and vicious. You are embarrassing yourself. Nobody cares about your old maps. These people are here for the future, not the past. I looked him in the eye. I did not blink. I am not here for the crowd, Preston, I said, my voice steady. I am here for my things. Preston smirked. He looked at my battered cane. He looked at my empty hands. Your things, he scoffed. You do not have anything left, Isaac. I own the house, I own the land, I own the tractor in the barn, I even own the shirt on your back if I decided to call in your debts. What could you possibly want to take? I gripped the handle of my cane. The old plow, I said. Preston blinked. He looked confused. The what, he asked. The hand plow, I said. The one in the shed. My grandfather used it. I used it. It is rusted and heavy and worth about $2 in scrap metal, but it turned this soil for 50 years. I want to take it with me before you turn this place into a hole. Preston threw his head back and laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. He turned to the investors who were watching us with curiosity. Did you hear that everyone? Preston shouted, pointing at me. He came all this way. He broke out of the hospital. And do you know what he wants? He wants a rusty old plow. The crowd laughed. This time it was louder. They were relieved. The crazy old man just wanted a souvenir. The threat was gone. Preston turned back to me. His eyes were shining with triumph. He felt big. He felt untouchable. And when a man feels untouchable, he gets careless. You are pathetic, Isaac Preston hissed, leaning in until his forehead was almost touching mine. You are a scavenger picking through the trash. I kept my face neutral. I needed him to say more. I needed him to say it all. "Why are you doing this, Preston?" I asked, my voice soft, almost pleading. I tried to sound broken. I tried to sound like the defeated old man he wanted me to be. Why take the land? Why hurt Nia? She loves you. You promised to take care of her. Preston sneered. He lowered his voice to a whisper, but I knew the microphone in my pocket was sensitive. It would catch every syllable. "Love," he spat. "Do not be stupid. I do not love your daughter. I tolerate her. She is a necessary inconvenience, Isaac. I needed a connection to the land to bypass the zoning laws. I needed a local heir to fast-track the title transfer. Nia was just the key to the lock. My hand tightened on my cane until my knuckles turned white. It took every ounce of my willpower not to strike him across the jaw. "She is your wife," I said. "She is a signature," Preston corrected me. "And now that I have the land, she is expired cargo. As soon as the wire transfer clears tomorrow morning, I am filing for annulment. I will toss her out on the street with nothing but the clothes on her back." He smiled. A cold, dead smile. "And as for you, Isaac, I am going to put you in a facility so cheap they feed the patients dog food. I will make sure you rot in the dark while I spend your millions on my new yacht." "Got you." I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. He had said it. He had admitted the fraud. He had admitted the marriage was a sham. He had admitted the intent to harm. I looked past Preston's shoulder. I saw Nia standing on the porch. She was too far away to hear him, but she was watching me. Her eyes were filled with tears. She looked terrified. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Hold on, baby girl. The bridge is about to blow." Preston stepped back. He patted my cheek hard enough to sting. "Go get your plow, old man," he said loudly for the crowd to hear. "And then get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." He turned his back on me. He walked back toward the stairs, ready to resume his victory speech. He adjusted his tie, preparing to charm the investors again. But I was not done. I did not move toward the shed. I stayed right where I was at the foot of the stairs. I cleared my throat. "Preston," I called out. He stopped. He turned around annoyed. "What now?" "Isaac, do you want the old tractor too?" "No," I said. "I just wanted to ask you one question about the map." I held up the certified document from the Hall of Records again. The red ink of the chemical warning was visible even in the twilight. Preston rolled his eyes. "I told you nobody cares about your map, Isaac. It is 70 years old." "I know," I said. "But the law cares." I turned to the crowd. I scanned the faces of the investors. I was looking for one man in particular. I had seen him earlier. He was a tall man in a gray suit standing near the back. He was not drinking champagne. He was reading a file on his tablet. I knew who he was. Arthur Sterling. No relation to the crooked doctor. Arthur Sterling was the head of risk management for the largest investment firm in Dallas. He was the money behind the money, and he was a man who did not like surprises. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice carrying over the lawn, "I noticed you checking the soil reports earlier." Preston froze. He looked at Arthur Sterling. Sterling stepped forward. He looked at me, then he looked at Preston. "I was indeed," he said. His voice was dry and authoritative. "Mr. Sterling," I continued, "does your risk assessment model account for federal Superfund cleanup costs?" Preston stepped in quickly. "Arthur, do not listen to him," Preston said, waving his hand dismissively. "He is rambling." Sterling did not look at Preston. He looked at me. "Superfund cleanup?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. I tapped the map with my cane. According to the United States Army Corps of Engineers, this entire North Pasture is a Class B hazardous waste disposal site. It contains 50 tons of degrading chemical munitions casings buried 20 feet down. If anyone digs here without a federal containment team, they will release a cloud of toxic gas that will kill everything within 3 miles, including everyone standing at this party. A murmur went through the crowd. People stopped drinking. A woman near the front took a step back from the grass as if it had suddenly turned into lava. Preston's face was purple. "That is a lie," he screamed. "That map is a forgery." He made it up. "We have clean environmental reports. I have them in my office." I smiled. "You have reports that you paid for, Preston," I said. "But did you pay the Army to move the bombs?" Sterling walked forward. He walked right past Preston and stopped in front of me. "May I see that document, Mr. Robinson?" he asked. I handed him the map. Sterling took a pair of reading glasses from his pocket. He inspected the seal. He inspected the notary stamp. He looked at the date. He looked up at Preston. This is a certified government document, Preston Sterling said. Why was this not disclosed in the prospectus? Preston stammered. I did not know. I mean, it is an old survey, Arthur. We did core samples. We found nothing. You found nothing because you did not dig deep enough, I interrupted. Or maybe you did find it and you decided to bury the report just like you buried the truth about your finances. Preston glared at me. If looks could kill, I would be dead 10 times over. It is a mistake, Preston insisted, desperate now. Look at the date. 1952. Maybe they moved it. Maybe it was never there. Isaac is just trying to scare you. Mr. Sterling closed the map. He handed it back to me. In my business, Preston Sterling said coldly, we do not gamble on maybe. He turned to the other investors. I am pulling my funding, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Panic is contagious. Once one domino falls, the rest follow. If Arthur is out, I am out too. Another man shouted. Me too, said a woman in a red dress. I cannot be associated with an environmental crime. Preston watched in horror as his audience turned on him. The crowd that had been cheering him 5 minutes ago was now backing away, checking their phones, calling their lawyers. No, wait, please, Preston pleaded, running after them. It is a misunderstanding. Let me explain. There is no waste. It is just dirt, valuable granite. But nobody was listening. They were walking to their limousines. Engines were starting. Dust was rising. Preston stood alone on the driveway. His party was over. His funding was gone. He turned slowly to face me. The charm was gone. The businessman was gone. All that was left was a monster. You ruined it, he whispered. He walked toward me. His hands were curled into fists. His eyes were wide and vacant. You ruined everything, you old bastard. He reached into his jacket. I knew what he was reaching for. I had seen it in the study, the 9mm. The security guards had backed off, confused by the sudden exodus of the guests. They were not paid enough to intervene in a family shootout. Preston pulled the gun. You want to talk about burial sites? He screamed, pointing the weapon at my chest. I will make a new one right here. I did not flinch. I did not back down. I looked him straight in the eye. Go ahead, Preston, I said calmly. Pull the trigger. I tapped my chest pocket where the phone was. But you might want to know that for the last 10 minutes you have been broadcasting live to the FBI. Preston hesitated. His eyes flicked to my pocket. What he breathed. Agent Miller, I said, speaking clearly into my lapel. Are you getting this? From the darkness beyond the gate, a siren wailed. It was not the sheriff. It was a deep, authoritative siren, the kind that cuts through the night like a knife. Blue and red lights erupted from the tree line. Not one car, 10 cars. Black SUVs with federal plates smashed through the wooden fence surrounding the pasture. SWAT teams in tactical gear poured out of the vehicles, rifles raised, moving with military precision. Drop the weapon, a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. This is the FBI. Drop the weapon now. Preston spun around. He looked at the approaching agents. He looked at me. He looked at the gun in his hand. He realized too late that he was standing on a foundation of lies, and the collapse had just begun. The sirens were wailing in the distance, but Preston Caldwell was past the point of hearing them. He was in a state of manic denial. To him, the FBI agents coming through the trees were just another obstacle to be bought or bullied. He was fixated on one thing, the map. The piece of paper in my hand that claimed his gold mine was actually a graveyard. He lowered the gun, but he did not drop it. He turned to the massive yellow Caterpillar excavator parked next to the rose garden. The operator, a young man named Gonzalez, looked terrified. He had his hands up, looking at the federal agents swarming the perimeter. Dig. Preston screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. Gonzalez shook his head. No way, boss. The cops are here. I said dig, you coward, Preston roared, waving the gun toward the cab of the machine. Prove him wrong. Tear that barn down. Dig up the pasture. Show these idiots that there is nothing down there but dirt and granite. Preston turned back to me, his eyes wild. You think a piece of paper scares me, Isaac? You think a 70-year-old map stops me? I am going to expose your lie right now. I am going to dig a hole so deep they will see it from space, and when I pull up nothing but clean, solid rock, I am going to bury you in it. He fired a shot into the air. The crack of the pistol sent a wave of panic through the yard. Gonzalez flinched and ducked inside the reinforced cab of the excavator. He was scared of the police, but he was more scared of the madman with the 9mm. He grabbed the control sticks. The massive diesel engine roared to life, belching black smoke into the twilight. "No," I shouted, stepping forward. "Do not do it, Preston. You have no idea what is down there." Preston laughed. It was the sound of a man who had snapped. "I know exactly what is down there," he yelled over the engine noise. "Money. Millions of dollars of money." He signaled Gonzalez to move. The excavator tracks groaned as they chewed up the gravel. The machine spun around its massive steel arm, rising like the neck of a mechanical dinosaur. The toothed bucket hovered over the spot where my old tool shed stood, the exact center of the red oval on the map. "Stop!" I screamed, waving my cane. "You are going to kill us all!" But Preston was cheering. "Tear it up!" he shouted. The bucket came down. It smashed through the wooden roof of the shed like it was made of matchsticks. Splinters flew into the air. The crowd of investors who had been fleeing stopped to watch. It was a train wreck. They could not look away. The bucket bit into the earth. It tore through the topsoil, the roses, and the rich, dark dirt I had cultivated for decades. "Deeper," Preston screamed. "Go deeper!" Gonzalez pushed the stick forward. The hydraulic rams hissed. The bucket dug down 5 feet, 10 feet. Suddenly there was a sound that was not earth or wood. Clang. It was the sound of metal hitting concrete, a dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the ground. Preston froze. The smile dropped from his face. Gonzalez tried to pull the bucket back, but it was snagged. He revved the engine. The machine strained. "Rip it out!" Preston yelled. "It is just an old septic tank. Rip it out!" Gonzalez yanked the controls. With a sickening screech of tearing metal and crumbling concrete, the excavator pulled free. But it brought something up with it. It was not granite. It was not gold. A plume of yellowish-black gas erupted from the hole. It hissed like a nest of vipers. And then came the liquid. Thick black sludge bubbled up from the depths, oozing over the sides of the crater. It did not look like oil. It looked like death. The smell hit us a second later. It was not the smell of sewage. It was a sharp, acrid chemical sting that burned the inside of your nose and made your eyes water instantly. It smelled like bitter almonds and rotting metal. The investors gagged, covering their mouths with expensive handkerchiefs. "What is that?" Preston whispered, stepping back. I lowered my cane. I watched the black sludge spread across the white gravel. "I told you, Preston." I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the silence. I turned to the FBI agents who had stopped their advance, putting on gas masks. I turned to Arthur Sterling, the investor who was staring at the hole in horror. And finally I turned to Preston. "You just breached the seal," I said. Preston looked at me, shaking his head. "What is it?" he stammered. "Oil." "Is it oil?" I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "You wish it was oil," I said. "If it was oil, you would be rich. But that Preston, that is mustard gas residue mixed with degrading heavy metals." I pointed to the hole. "In 1980, I bought this land for $500 an acre," I said. "Everyone thought I was crazy. The soil was toxic. Nothing grew here. The Army had used this site to bury surplus chemical casings after the war. They dumped them in a concrete bunker and forgot about them." Preston's face was the color of chalk. You bought a toxic waste dump," he whispered. "I bought a project," I corrected him. "I am a structural engineer, Preston. I know how to build containment. I spent 10 years of my life and every penny I earned pouring a reinforced concrete sarcophagus over that bunker. I sealed it. I capped it with clay. I brought in new topsoil. I planted grass. I healed this land. I looked at the black sludge creeping toward his Italian leather shoes. I made it safe," I said. "I promised the county that as long as that concrete seal remained unbroken, this land was harmless. It was a sanctuary." I looked him dead in the eye. "And you just broke it." Preston dropped the gun. It clattered on the stones. He looked at the investors. "Wait," he pleaded. "We can fix it. We can clean it up." I shook my head. "You cannot fix this with a mop, Preston," I said. I pulled out my burner phone. I pressed the speaker button. "Mr. Robinson," a voice came on the line. "This is Director Vance from the EPA. We are watching the drone feed." "We heard you, Director," I said. "The breach is confirmed," Vance said, his voice stern. "We are declaring the Robinson Hills estate a federal Superfund site effective immediately. Code Red. The area is quarantined. No one enters. No one leaves without decontamination. Preston fell to his knees. And the liability, I asked, looking at Arthur Sterling. Under federal law, Vance continued, the current title holder is responsible for 100% of the cleanup costs. Preliminary estimates for a breach of this magnitude are between $40 and $50 million. I hung up the phone. I looked at Preston. He was kneeling in the dirt, staring at the bubbling sludge. Did you hear that, Preston? I asked. $40 million. I walked over to him. I leaned down, ignoring the burning in my eyes from the fumes. The land was worth $10 million yesterday, I said. But you were so greedy. You had to have it all. You forced me to sign that deed. You rushed the transfer. You wanted to be the owner so badly. I tapped his chest where the forged deed was sitting in his pocket. Congratulations, son, I whispered. You are now the proud owner of a $40 million debt. Preston looked up at me. His eyes were empty. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was the realization that he had dug his own grave. Arthur Sterling walked up to us. He was wearing a mask he had taken from his emergency kit. Mr. Caldwell Sterling said, his voice muffled but cold as ice. My firm has a zero-tolerance policy for environmental negligence. We are freezing all your accounts to cover our exposure, and I am personally filing a lawsuit against you for fraud. He turned to the other investors. Do not touch anything, he warned them. Get to the perimeter for decontamination. The investors scattered, running toward the police lines like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Preston remained on his knees. He looked at the house. My house. It is worthless, he whispered. It is all worthless. No, Preston, I said, standing up straight. The house is just wood and stone. The land is just dirt. They can be cleaned. They can be rebuilt. I looked at Nia, who was being led to safety by a medic. But your reputation, I said, that is toxic waste, and there is no cleanup crew in the world that can fix that. The FBI agents moved in. They did not need to run. Preston was not going anywhere. He was paralyzed by the weight of his own greed. I watched them cuff him. I watched them drag him away from the sludge. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of chemicals, but underneath it I could still smell the faint scent of my wife roses. The foundation had held. The enemy had collapsed. But the war was not over yet. I looked at the hole in the ground. Now I just had to clean up the mess. The frantic exodus of the investors was a sight to behold. It was not a polite departure. It was a stampede. Men who managed billion-dollar hedge funds were scrambling over the pasture fence like frightened cattle. Women were abandoning their high heels in the mud, sprinting toward their cars. The fear of federal prison and toxic exposure had stripped away their dignity in seconds. Arthur Sterling was the last to leave. He paused by his limousine, looking back at Preston Caldwell with a look of absolute contempt. Consider. Our business concluded, Mr. Caldwell Sterling shouted over the roar of engines. My lawyers will be in touch about the breach of contract, and Preston, do not bother deleting your emails. We have already archived them. The limousine door slammed shut. The car tore away, spraying gravel onto Preston's expensive suit. Preston stood alone in the middle of the driveway. The dust from the departing convoy swirled around him, choking him. The FBI agents had paused their advance, holding the perimeter, waiting for the hazardous gas to dissipate. It was just me and him, the engineer and the fraud. Preston turned slowly to face me. His face was no longer human. It was a mask of contorted rage. His eyes were bloodshot, bulging from their sockets. His mouth hung open, trying to process the magnitude of his loss. You did this, he whispered. His voice was trembling, not with fear but with a psychotic fury. I leaned on my cane, watching him. I did not do anything, Preston, I said calmly. Gravity did this. You built a skyscraper on a swamp. All I did was kick the bottom brick. Preston let out a scream that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. He tore off his jacket and threw it into the mud. He tore at his tie until it ripped. That was my money, he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. That was my life. Do you have any idea who I owe? Do you have any idea what they are going to do to me now? They are going to kill you, Preston, I said simply. Because you promised them a fortress and you gave them a poison pill. That truth was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Preston snapped. I will kill you first, he roared. He did not look for a weapon. He became the weapon. He lowered his shoulder and charged at me. He was 32 years old, 6 feet 2 inches of desperate muscle. I was 72 with a broken leg encased in plaster. By all accounts, I should have been terrified. But Preston was running on blind rage. I was standing on physics. I did not retreat. I did not flinch. I planted my good leg firmly on the gravel, creating a pivot point. I gripped my hickory cane with both hands like a baseball bat. Preston closed the distance in 2 seconds. He was aiming to tackle me, to drive me into the ground and beat the life out of me. He was fast, but he was reckless. At the last possible second, I sidestepped. It was a small movement, just 6 inches to the left. But it was enough. Preston momentum carried him forward. He tried to adjust, but he was moving too fast. I swung the cane. I did not aim for his head. That would be messy. I aimed for his center of gravity. I brought the heavy hickory wood down hard across the back of his knees. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud. It was the sound of bone meeting hardwood. Preston's legs swept out from under him. He hit the gravel face first with the force of a car crash. The air left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He slid across the stones, tearing his silk shirt and scraping the skin off his palms. He tried to scramble up, but I was already there. I brought the cane down again. This time I struck his right shoulder. "Stay down," I commanded. Preston yelled in pain, rolling onto his back. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw true fear in his eyes. He realized that the old man he had mocked was not helpless. "You broke my shoulder," he whimpered, clutching his arm. "You broke my family," I said, my voice cold as steel. "Consider us even." He tried to kick out at me, but I pressed the rubber tip of my cane into the center of his chest, right on his sternum. I leaned my weight onto it, pinning him to the ground. "Do not move," I said, "unless you want me to test the structural integrity of your rib cage." Preston gasped, clawing uselessly at the cane. Suddenly the air was filled with a new sound. It was not a siren. It was a digital chime. It started with my phone. Then, Preston's phone in the mud began to buzz. Then the phones of the FBI agents standing 20 yards away began to ring. It was a synchronized alert. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my burner. A notification flashed on the screen. It was a mass email sent to every major news outlet, every federal agency, and every bank in Texas. The subject line was simple: the Caldwell Laundromat. I smiled. Marcus. My student had done exactly what I taught him. He had not just found the cracks. He had exposed the entire blueprint. I looked down at Preston. "I think you have a notification," I said. Preston struggled to reach his phone. He looked at the screen. His face went pale white. "What is this?" he whispered. I leaned over and read the screen aloud. Attached are the full unredacted ledgers of the Caldwell Trust showing systematic money laundering for the Martinez cartel. Also attached are the wire transfer records proving the embezzlement of investor funds and the bribery of county officials. I looked at him. "It is over, Preston. The world knows." Preston dropped the phone. He stared up at the night sky. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a hollow shell. The FBI agents finally moved in. The gas cloud had settled and they had seen the assault. 2 agents in tactical gear grabbed Preston by his arms and hauled him to his feet. They did not be gentle. They slammed him against the hood of a black SUV. "You have the right to remain silent," an agent barked, kicking Preston's legs apart. Preston's face was pressed against the hot metal of the car hood. Mud and blood were smeared across his cheek. He looked at the agents, then he looked at me. He started to laugh. It was a low, guttural sound that started in his chest and worked its way up. It was the laugh of a man who had lost his mind but found one last jagged piece of glass to hold on to. "Why are you laughing?" the agent asked, tightening the handcuffs. Preston lifted his head. He looked straight at me. His eyes were gleaming with a toxic malice. "You think you won, Isaac?" he spat. "You think because you found the money and the poison that you won." I stood leaning on my cane, watching him. "I saved my home," I said. "I saved my daughter." "Did you?" Preston asked. He twisted his body, fighting against the cuffs so he could face me fully. "You forgot one thing, Isaac. You forgot the most important thing." "What is that?" I asked. "The law," Preston shouted. His voice echoed off the barn. "The law says that a husband has rights. The law says that until a judge signs a decree, I am still the legal head of this household." He grinned, showing teeth stained with blood. "I am still Nia husband Isaac." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "The marriage was a sham," I said. "You forced her." "Prove it." Preston screamed. "We have a license. We have witnesses. We have a consummated union in the eyes of the state of Texas." He laughed again, manic and wild. "You can send me to prison, Isaac. You can take my money, but you cannot take my rights. As her husband, I have the power of attorney over her medical decisions. Remember the paper she signed. It is still valid." The agent shoved him down, but Preston kept shouting, "I will have her committed, Isaac. I will do it from my jail cell. I will sign the order tonight. I will have her locked away in the darkest hole in the state, and you will never see her again. You cannot stop me. I am her husband." I stood there frozen. He was right. The criminal charges did not automatically nullify the civil contracts. The power of attorney was a separate legal instrument. Until a family court judge intervened, which could take weeks, Preston technically held the power to destroy Nia life. He knew the system, he knew the loopholes. He was going to use his last breath of freedom to drag my daughter down with him. I looked at the house. I saw Nia standing in the doorway. She was safe from the gas, but she was not safe from him. Preston was being shoved into the back of the SUV. "I am her husband," he screamed one last time before the door slammed shut. "She belongs to me." I gripped my cane. My knuckles turned white. I had destroyed his finances. I had destroyed his reputation. I had destroyed his freedom, but I had not destroyed his legal hold on my child. I watched the SUV drive away. I looked at my phone. Marcus was still on the line. "Did you hear that, Marcus?" I asked. "I heard it, Mr. Robinson." Marcus whispered. "Find me a judge," I said. "Find me a lawyer. Find me a loophole." "Mr. Robinson," Marcus said, his voice hesitant. "There is one way, but it is risky. It involves the one person you swore you would never talk to again." I closed my eyes. I knew who he meant. "Make the call," I said. The war was not over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The interrogation room at the county precinct smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was a small gray box with a two-way mirror on one wall and a metal table bolted to the floor in the center. Preston Caldwell sat on one side of that table. His expensive suit was ruined. His face was streaked with dirt from the pasture. His hands were cuffed to the steel bar on the table, but his mouth was still moving. I stood on the other side of the glass watching him. Nia stood next to me, wrapped in a blanket provided by a paramedic. She was shaking not from cold, but from the aftershocks of trauma. "He is still talking," Nia whispered. "How does he have the energy to keep talking?" "Because he is a con man," I said softly. "And a con man only stops talking when he is dead. Until then, he thinks he can talk his way out of the grave." I pushed the door open and walked into the room. Preston's head snapped up. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. The fear I had seen at the ranch was gone, replaced by a new frantic strategy. He sat up straighter, trying to reclaim some shred of his lost authority. "You," he spat. "You old son of a bitch." Language. "Mr. Caldwell," the FBI agent standing in the corner said lazily. Preston ignored him. He leaned forward, the chain of his handcuffs rattling against the metal table. "You think you are clever," Isaac Preston sneered. "You think you trapped me with that environmental report, but you forgot one thing." I sat down in the metal chair opposite him. I rested my cane against the table. "What did I forget, Preston?" I asked. "You sold me that land," Preston said, his voice rising in triumph. "You signed the deed transfer in the hospital. I have the document right here in my pocket. The police seized it as evidence, but it is still a legal contract." He looked at the agent. "Officer, I want to file charges against this man." The agent raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For fraud," Preston shouted. "He sold me a property knowing it was a federal toxic waste site. He did not disclose the hazard. That is material misrepresentation. That is a felony. If I am going down for the environmental cleanup, he is coming with me for selling me the poison." Preston looked back at me, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "We are partners now, Isaac. I might be bankrupt, but you are going to prison for real estate fraud. I will sue you for every penny you have. I will tie this up in court for 20 years. You will die in a deposition room." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had threatened my daughter, who had pushed me down the stairs, who had tried to destroy my life. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was not a new crisp document like the ones Preston used. It was old. The edges were yellowed and soft with age. It had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. The typewriter ink was faded to a dull gray. I slid it across the metal table. "What is this?" Preston asked, looking at it with suspicion. "Read it," I said. Preston hesitated. Then he leaned over, using his cuffed hands to awkwardly open the paper. He began to read. His eyes scanned the header, then the first paragraph. I watched his face. I watched the confusion turn to disbelief and then to absolute horror. This is impossible," he whispered. "Keep reading," I said. "Read the date." Preston looked at the bottom of the page. "September 12th, 2012, he read. "That was Naya 18th birthday," I said. Preston looked up at me. "What does this mean?" "It means you are not a very good researcher." "Preston," I said. I leaned forward. "On the day my daughter became a legal adult, I transferred the title of the Robinson Hills estate into the Robinson Family Conservation Trust." I pointed to the yellow paper. "That is the charter. The trust is irrevocable. It is a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. The goal is to preserve the land for future generations." Preston shook his head, trying to process the legal jargon. "So, what?" he stammered. "Nia is the beneficiary. She owns the trust." "No," I said. "Nia is a board member. I am the manager. But neither of us owns the land. The trust owns the land. And according to Article 5, Section 3, which you are staring at right now, no single board member has the authority to sell, transfer, or encumber the property without a unanimous vote from the entire board of directors." I sat back. "The board has 5 members, Preston. Me, Naya, and 3 environmental lawyers from the Conservancy who live in Washington, D.C. Preston's face went slack. "So, when Nia signed the papers," he whispered. "It meant nothing," I said. "And when you signed the papers in the hospital," he asked, his voice barely audible. I smiled. "It meant less than nothing." I picked up the yellow paper and folded it carefully, putting it back in my pocket. "You cannot sell what you do not own, Preston. Naya did not own the land. I did not own the land. We were just tenants. Those deeds you forced us to sign. They are just expensive scrap paper. They have no legal standing. You never bought the land. You never owned the land. And you certainly cannot sue me for selling you a toxic waste site because, legally speaking, no sale ever occurred." Preston sat there frozen. The silence in the room was deafening. He had lost the land. He had lost the money. And now he had lost his leverage. But then a look of relief washed over his face. He started to laugh, a nervous, shaky laugh. "So I am off the hook," he said. I frowned. "What?" "If the sale never happened," Preston said, talking fast, his mind racing, "if the deed is void, then I do not own the land. That means I am not responsible for the cleanup costs. The EPA cannot find me. And if I never owned it, I cannot be charged with laundering money through it." He looked at the agent. "You have to let me go. It was a failed transaction, attempted fraud maybe, but the deal did not go through. I am clean." He looked at me, his arrogance returning. "You outsmarted yourself, Isaac. You saved your land, but you saved me too. Without the title, I am just a guy who tried to buy a farm. You cannot keep me here." I looked at the FBI agent. The agent smiled. It was not a nice smile. I stood up. I picked up my cane. "You are right, Preston," I said. "You do not own the land, so you are not liable for the cleanup." Preston slumped back in his chair, exhaling a massive breath of relief. "Thank you," he said, closing his eyes. "God, I need a drink." But I continued. "There is one small problem." Preston opened one eye. "What problem?" "The bank," I said. Preston froze. I looked at the clock on the wall. "You see, Preston, when you left the hospital this morning, you did not just go to the party. You went to the First National Bank. Marcus tracked your GPS. You walked into the branch at 9 a.m. So what?" Preston snapped. "I made a deposit." "No," I said. "You made a withdrawal. You presented the deed signed by me as collateral to secure an emergency bridge loan of $2 million to pay the cartel." Preston's face turned gray. "You handed that deed to a loan officer," I continued. "You signed a document stating that you were the legal owner of the property and that you had the right to leverage it. The bank accepted it because they believed you. They wired the $2 million to your account. And then you wired it to Mexico." I leaned in close. Preston, using a forged or invalid document to secure funds from a federally insured financial institution, is called bank fraud. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And using the wire system to send those fraudulent funds across international borders," I added, "is called wire fraud." The FBI agent stepped forward. He pulled a file from his briefcase. "Preston Caldwell," the agent said, reading from the file. "You are under arrest for 4 counts of bank fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. But," Preston stammered, "but the deed, it was a trick. He tricked me." "It does not matter if it was a trick," the agent said, closing the file. "You believed it was real. You presented it as real. And you took the money. The intent was there. The action was there. The crime is complete." I watched the realization hit him. "It was a trap," I whispered. "I signed that paper knowing it was worthless. I knew you would run straight to the bank. I knew you were desperate. If I had refused to sign, you might have hurt Nia. But by signing it, I gave you the rope to hang yourself." I stood up. "You wanted to be a big shot, Preston. You wanted to play with the big boys. Well, welcome to the big leagues. Federal sentencing guidelines for bank fraud start at 30 years. Preston started to shake. The reality of spending the rest of his life in a concrete cell was finally sinking in. "Isaac, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please tell them. Tell them you entrapped me. I will annul the marriage. I will disappear. Just help me." I looked at him. I looked at the tears. They were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a narcissist who had lost his audience. I turned my back on him. I walked to the door. Nia was waiting for me. She looked strong. She looked free. Isaac Preston screamed, "You cannot leave me here. I am family." I stopped. I looked back at him one last time. "Family is built on a solid foundation, Preston," I said. "You are just debris." I walked out of the room. Behind me I heard the sound of a grown man sobbing. It echoed off the metal walls. But I did not stop. I walked down the hallway, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. Nia took my arm. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Is it over, Dad?" she asked. I looked at her. I saw the bruises on her wrist where he had grabbed her. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but underneath it I saw the steel that she had inherited from me. "The storm is over, baby girl," I said. "Now we just have to rebuild the house." We walked out of the police station into the cool night air. The stars were shining bright over Texas. My leg was broken. My body was tired, but my spirit was lighter than it had been in years. I had faced a monster. I had faced a giant machine, and I had faced my own mortality, and I was still standing. Because a good engineer knows that the strongest structures are not the ones that never shake. They are the ones that can absorb the shock and keep standing tall. The sound of the handcuffs locking around Preston Caldwell's wrists was the sweetest music I had heard in 40 years. It was a sharp metallic click that signaled the end of the nightmare. 2 federal agents hauled him out of the interrogation chair. He was limp. The fight had gone out of him, leaving only the trembling shell of a man who realized his life was over. They marched him out of the small gray room and into the main booking area of the precinct. It was a chaotic sea of desks, phones, and officers, but when they brought Preston through, the room seemed to go quiet. Everyone stopped to look, not because he was famous, but because the smell of ruin on him was so strong it was almost physical. I followed him out, leaning on my cane. Nia walked beside me. Her head was held high. She was no longer the terrified girl in the wedding dress. She was a Robinson. We reached the front desk where the intake sergeant was waiting. But the show was not over yet. The main doors of the precinct swung open. 4 more FBI agents walked in, and between them they were escorting 2 people who looked like they had stepped out of a society gala and straight into hell. Catherine and Richard Caldwell. Preston stopped. He stared at his parents. Catherine was wearing a fur coat over her silk pajamas. Her makeup was smeared. Her hands, usually adorned with diamonds, were cuffed behind her back. Richard looked gray. The arrogance that had filled my living room just 24 hours ago was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man facing bankruptcy and prison. "Mom," Preston whispered. "Dad." Catherine looked at her son. She did not look at him with love. She looked at him with blame. "You idiot," she hissed, lunging at him before the agent pulled her back. "You told us it was safe. You told us the land was clean. You told us the transfer would cover the debt." Richard hung his head. "We are finished, Preston," he groaned. "The feds seized the accounts. They raided the house. They found the ledger in the safe." Preston's face crumbled. Seeing his parents in cuffs broke the last wall of his denial. He realized that he had not just destroyed himself, he had taken the entire dynasty down with him. The agents pushed the parents forward, processing them for conspiracy and racketeering. Preston turned to look at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of hatred and awe. "You planned this," he screamed. His voice was raw, echoing off the tile walls. He lunged toward me, but the agents held him back. "You knew about the bank loan," he shouted. "You knew I would use the deed. You waited. You waited until I made the transfer to call the EPA. You set me up." I stood there calm and unmoving. I rested my hands on the head of my hickory cane. I did not answer him. I did not need to. Nia stepped forward. She walked right up to Preston. She was close enough to smell the sweat and fear on him. She looked him up and down. Preston looked at her. For a second, he tried to put the mask back on. He tried to summon the charm that had manipulated her for years. "Nia, baby," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You can fix this. Tell them. Tell them we are married. Tell them I did it for us. We can still fight this. You have the trust fund. You can bail me out." Nia stared at him. Her face was a mask of stone. She raised her left hand. The diamond engagement ring glittered under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station. It was a massive stone, a symbol of his wealth, a symbol of his ownership. And now we all knew it was bought with blood money. She reached over with her right hand and gripped the ring. "I am not your baby," Nia said, her voice low and dangerous. "And I am not your wife." She pulled the ring off. It was tight, but she yanked it over her knuckle, scraping the skin. She did not flinch. She held the ring up. "You wanted a transaction, Preston," she said. "You wanted a deal. Here is your return on investment." She threw the ring. It hit him square in the chest, bouncing off his ruined suit and clattering onto the dirty linoleum floor. It spun for a moment, flashing one last time before coming to rest in the dust. "Fake," Nia whispered. "It is all fake. The ring, the love, the money. You." Preston stared at the ring on the floor. He looked like he wanted to cry. Nia turned her back on him. She walked over to me and took my arm. "Let us go, Dad," she said. "I am done with him." We started to walk toward the exit. Isaac Preston screamed. I stopped. I turned around slowly. Preston was fighting against the agents again. He was straining toward me, his face purple with rage. "You gapped me," he yelled. "You entrapped me. You knew I would take the bait. You knew I was desperate. You played me like a fiddle. I knew everything, Preston." I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of a judge gavel. I walked back toward him, just a few steps. I wanted him to hear this clearly. I wanted him to remember this moment for the next 30 years while he sat in a cell. "I am a structural engineer, son," I said. I pointed my cane at his chest. "I have spent my life studying why things fall down." Preston stopped struggling. He stared at me, breathing hard. "I do not build anything without calculating the maximum load," I continued. "I measure the stress points. I test the foundation." I looked him in the eye. "Your greed was too heavy, Preston. You wanted the land, you wanted the money, you wanted the girl. You piled it all on top of a foundation built on lies." I shook my head. "I did not have to push you," I said. "I just had to wait. Because when the load is heavier than the character, the collapse is inevitable." Preston stared at me. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The truth of it hit him harder than my cane ever could. He was not a victim of my plot. He was a victim of his own weight. "Take him away," I said to the agents. The agents nodded. They dragged Preston toward the holding cells. He did not scream anymore. He dragged his feet, staring at the floor, staring at the ring he had left behind in the dust. I watched him disappear through the heavy steel doors. The clang of the door slamming shut echoed through the station. It was a final sound, the sound of a chapter ending. I looked at Catherine and Richard. They were being led into separate interrogation rooms. They did not look at me. They were too busy looking at the floor, trying to hide their shame. I turned to Nia. She was crying. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. The kind of tears that wash away the dirt after a long storm. She rested her head on my shoulder. "You calculated the load, Dad," she whispered. I wrapped my arm around her. "Always, baby girl," I said. "Always." We walked out of the precinct into the cool night air. The city was quiet. The stars were shining. I took a deep breath. My leg hurt. My body ached. But I felt lighter than air. The foundation was safe. The structure had held. And the debris had been cleared away. The silence that hangs over Robinson Hills today is different than it was 6 months ago. Back then, the silence was heavy. It was the suffocating quiet of secrets and fear. It was the silence of a daughter hiding bruises and a father hiding a plan. But today, the silence is clean. It is the sound of the wind moving through the oak trees. It is the sound of the red-tailed hawk circling high above the north pasture. It is the sound of peace. I am sitting on the front porch in my favorite rocking chair. My leg is out of the cast. It is stiff, and I walk with a slight limp that will probably never go away, but it is a small price to pay. The doctor said at 72 bones do not heal like they used to. I told him that may be true, but my backbone is stronger than ever. 6 months have passed since the FBI raid. 6 months since the Environmental Protection Agency set up their white tents on my land. It was a difficult time. For 3 months, my ranch looked like a science fiction movie set. Men in hazmat suits roamed the fields. Massive machines drilled and pumped. The government remediation team was efficient. They confirmed what I already knew. The breach Preston caused was contained quickly. The sarcophagus I built 40 years ago had held up better than anyone expected. The damage was minimal, but the cleanup was mandatory. I paid the fines. I paid the costs. It drained my savings, but I did not care. Money is just paper. Land is legacy. And now the tents are gone. The warning tape is gone. The grass is starting to grow back over the scar in the earth. It is sparse and tentative, but it is green. I look over at the large wooden table we set up on the porch. Naya is sitting there. She is wearing jeans and a loose cotton shirt. Her hair is natural, free from the tight chemical straightening she used to do when she was with Preston. She looks younger. She looks like herself. Spread out in front of her are large sheets of blue paper. Blueprints. She is holding a drafting pencil in her hand, twirling it absent-mindedly as she stares at the horizon. For a long time after the arrest, she could not draw. She said her hands shook too much. She said she had lost her vision. Preston had criticized her work for so long, telling her she was mediocre, telling her she should just be a trophy wife, that she had started to believe him. But I knew the engineer was still in there. I knew the architect was just sleeping. I watched her pick up the pencil and make a sharp, confident line on the paper. I leaned forward. "What are you working on, baby girl?" I asked. Nia looked up. Her eyes were bright. "I am redesigning the barn, Dad," she said. "The one Preston tried to tear down." I nodded. "It needs work. The roof is sagging." "No," she said, smiling. "I am not just fixing the roof. I am reimagining the structure." She turned the blueprint around so I could see. "Look," she said, pointing with the pencil. "I want to keep the original timber frame. The wood is old, but the core is solid oak. But I want to open up the west wall, replace the siding with reinforced glass. We can turn it into a studio, a place to work, a place to create." I studied the drawing. It was brilliant. It respected the history of the building but gave it a new purpose. It was strong, it was functional, and it was beautiful. "It is a good design, Nia," I said. "The load-bearing distribution is perfect." She laughed. It was a real laugh, not the polite, nervous titter she used to give at Preston parties. This was a belly laugh that came from her soul. I learned from the best she said. She went back to drawing. I sat back and picked up my glass of iced tea. The condensation was cold against my fingers. I took a sip and looked out at the vast Texas sky. It was a deep, endless blue. I thought about Preston. The trial had been swift. The federal prosecutors did not play games. With the evidence Marcus provided and the testimony of the bank officers, it was an open and shut case. Preston Caldwell was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His parents got 15 years each for conspiracy and racketeering. The Caldwell dynasty was gone. The mansion in the Heights was seized. The cars were auctioned. The name that had terrified my daughter was now just a number in the inmate registry. Nia had received a letter from him a week ago. It was sent from Leavenworth. She had stood by the mailbox holding the envelope. I asked her if she wanted to read it. She looked at the handwriting, the same handwriting that had signed the fake medical orders, the same handwriting that had tried to sign away my life. She did not open it. She did not tear it up in anger. She simply walked over to the burn barrel we use for trash and dropped it in. She watched it turn to ash without shedding a single tear. "He does not exist," she had said. "He is just a structural failure that we demolished." I took another sip of tea. I watched a butterfly land on the railing of the porch. I thought about the journey we had taken. I thought about the fear I felt in that church. I thought about the pain of the fall down the stairs. I thought about the moment I signed that deed with my left hand, knowing it was the only way to trap him. It was a gamble. It was the biggest risk of my life. but as I looked at Nia drawing her future on that blue paper, I knew it was worth it. I did not just save the land. The land was important, yes. It was my blood and sweat. But the land could recover on its own. Nature is resilient. My daughter was the structure that needed saving. Preston had tried to dismantle her. He had tried to remove her confidence brick by brick. He had tried to weaken her foundation until she collapsed into something he could control. But he was wrong about her too. He thought she was weak because she was quiet. He thought she was submissive because she was kind. He did not realize that she was my daughter. He did not realize that under that soft exterior was the same granite that lay beneath this ranch. She just needed the weight removed so she could stand tall again. Nia looked up from her work. She caught me staring at her. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" she asked. I smiled. "I am thinking about foundations," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "The barn foundation. Do you think we need to underpin it?" "No," I said. "The barn is fine." I looked her in the eye. "I am talking about us." I put my glass down. "Preston tried to break us, Nia. He hit us with everything he had. Money, lies, threats, force." Nia stopped drawing. She looked at me intently. "But he failed," I said. "Because he did not understand how we were built. He built his life on leverage and debt. We built ours on truth and loyalty." I tapped my chest. "A lie is a stress fracture, Nia. It starts small, but it grows under pressure until the whole thing snaps. But the truth is rebar. It holds everything together even when the concrete cracks." Nia reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was strong. "We are still standing, Dad," she said. "Yes, we are," I said. I picked up the pen that was lying next to my tea. It was a simple ballpoint pen, not a Mont Blanc, just a reliable tool. I looked at the map of the ranch that was still pinned to the wall next to the door. The red oval was still there, a reminder of the danger we had survived. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It was the feeling an engineer gets when the final inspection is done and the bridge is open for traffic. The job is finished. The structure is safe. I watched the sun begin to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was cooling down. The crickets were starting their evening song. It was a good night. "I am going to make some dinner," Nia said, starting to gather her papers. I was thinking about stew. "Stew sounds good," I said. She stood up and walked into the house. The screen door slammed shut behind her. A familiar, comforting sound. I stayed on the porch for a moment longer. I looked at my hands. They were old. They were scarred. They were the hands of a man who had worked hard and fought hard. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence one last time. It was the silence of victory. And it was sweet. Moral of the story: silence is often the loudest scream, and patience is the most dangerous weapon. As a structural engineer, I spent my life calculating breaking points. I learned that every structure, no matter how grand or imposing, will collapse if its foundation is built on lies. Preston thought my age was a weakness, my silence was submission, and my skin color was a limit. He did not realize that while he was busy painting the facade, I was inspecting the cracks in his pillars. Never underestimate a man who builds things to last. He knows exactly how to take them apart. I hope this story reminded you that true strength is not about how loud you shout, but about how long you can stand your ground. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments which city you are tuning in from. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories about justice and resilience. See you in the next video. This journey taught me that evil often wears an expensive suit and speaks with a polished accent, but it cannot hide from the laws of nature. You cannot build a life on a foundation of theft and expect it to stand when the storm comes. I learned that being a father is not just about providing a roof over a child's head, it is about protecting the soul of the people who live under it. To anyone listening who feels too old, too weak, or too outnumbered to fight back, remember this: the granite under your feet is older and stronger than the dirt on top of it. Do not let them rush you. Do not let them silence you. Stand your ground, dig deep, and let the truth be your shield against their lies. If this story inspired you to stand firm against the storms in your own life, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice. Let me know in the comments which city you are tuning in from and if you have ever had to fight to protect your family legacy. I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and keep building.